3 in the morning and your mind won't stop. The same worries circle through your thoughts like birds trapped in a too small room. You've tried everything. Deep breathing, counting backward, telling yourself to just stop thinking. But the thoughts keep coming, each one pulling you further from sleep, further from peace. Tonight, we're going to explore something different. Not how to fight those thoughts, but how to find stillness even while they're there. We'll journey through Buddhist wisdom that spans 1,000 years and 5 different traditions, from mountain hermitages in Korea to Vietnamese monasteries born from war, from Chinese masters who taught that thoughts are like clouds in a vast sky, to Japanese monks who discovered that peace isn't the absence of thinking. These stories are offered as gentle, contemplative reflections inspired by Buddhist philosophy, created to support rest and inner quiet, not as medical or therapeutic advice. Before we begin our first story, let your body sink a little deeper into whatever's supporting you. Feel the weight of your head on the pillow. Notice the temperature of the air on your face. Let your jaw unclench, just slightly. Your shoulders can drop an inch or two. You're not alone in this wakefulness. Millions of people across time have lain awake with racing thoughts, and some of them found a way through, not by becoming someone different, but by understanding something essential about how the mind works. We'll walk that path together now. In a small monastery nestled between rice paddies in what is now Sri Lanka, during the 3rd century after the Buddha's passing, there lived a young monk named Rahula. Not the historical Rahula who was the Buddha's son, but a different Rahula, one whose parents had named him after that venerated disciple in hopes their child would find the same peace. Instead, this Rahula had found only worry. The monastery sat on the edge of a village where farmers rose before dawn to tend their crops. Rahula could hear them sometimes, their voices carrying across the water as they called to one another in the mist. The monastery itself was simple, a main hall with a clay tile roof that leaked when the monsoons came. Sleeping quarters arranged around a courtyard where a Bodhi tree grew, its leaves silver green and always moving in the slightest breeze. There was a well in the center of the courtyard, and every morning Rahula drew water from it, watching his reflection waver and break as the bucket descended into darkness. He had arrived at the monastery 7 months earlier, at 22 years old, fleeing a merchant family's expectation that he would manage their silk business. His father imported fabric from China and sold it to nobles in the capital, and Rahula had been trained since childhood in the art of negotiation, the weighing of quality against price, the delicate balance of profit and reputation. But sitting in those trading houses, watching bolt after bolt of silk unfold like colorful waterfalls, Rahula had felt something tighten in his chest, a voice in his head that never stopped speaking. What if I've miscalculated the price? What if this merchant is cheating us? What if father discovers I've made an error? What if we lose everything? What if I'm not clever enough? Not sharp enough? Not quick enough? The thoughts had followed him everywhere. Through the marketplace, where vendors called out their wares. Through dinner with his family, where he barely tasted the food. Into his sleeping mat at night, where they circled like crows around carrion, picking at every decision he'd made that day, every word he'd spoken, every glance he'd missed. When he'd finally told his father he wanted to become a monk, the old man had looked at him with something between disappointment and relief. "You think the monastery will quiet that mind of yours?" his father had asked. "Thoughts don't stop just because you shave your head." A boy. 7 months later, Rahula understood his father had been right. The monastery followed a strict schedule. Wake before dawn, meditation in the main hall, walking meditation around the grounds, study of the suttas, work maintaining the monastery, Alms round in the village. One meal before noon. More meditation. More study. Sleep. Rahula had thought the structure would help. Instead, he'd simply found new things to worry about. During meditation, when he was supposed to watch his breath, his mind catalogued failures. You're breathing wrong. Your posture is slouched. The monk next to you is deeper in concentration. You'll never attain even the first stage of awakening. You're wasting everyone's time. Why did you think you could do this? You should go back to your father's business. At least there you were useful. During the alms round, walking barefoot through the village with his bowl. What if no one gives you food today? What if they think you're a fraud? What if you trip and drop the bowl? What if the elderly woman who always smiles at you didn't smile this morning because she's realized you're not a real monk? Even during work periods, when he was supposed to lose himself in simple tasks, sweeping the courtyard, mending a roof, weeding the vegetable garden, his mind spun stories. You're doing this wrong. You're too slow. The abbot has noticed. The other monks are talking about you. They're going to ask you to leave. The worst times were late at night, lying on his thin mat in the sleeping quarters, listening to the other monks breathe deeply in their sleep. That's when the thoughts came fastest, piling on top of each other like monsoon rain. Each one convincing, each one urgent, each one demanding his attention. One morning, after a particularly sleepless night, Rahula made a mistake during the alms round. Lost in his thoughts, he stepped off the path and directly into a puddle, splashing muddy water up his robes and onto the hem of the elderly monk walking beside him. The monk, Venerable Sobhita, one of the most respected teachers in the monastery, stopped walking. The entire line of monks stopped with him. Rahula's mind erupted. Everyone saw. They're judging you. Sobhita is furious. You've disrespected him. You've broken the precepts somehow. You've ruined the whole alms round. The villagers are watching. They think the monastery accepts careless, mindless monks. This is unforgivable. You need to apologize. No, you need to stay silent. No, you need to prostrate yourself. No, you need to, Rahula. Venerable Sobhita said quietly. Are you here with us? Rahula opened his mouth, but no words came out. His heart was racing. His hands trembled around his bowl. I'm sorry. He finally managed. I'm so sorry, Venerable. I wasn't paying attention. I was. He stopped. He couldn't say it. I was lost in my thoughts. I was worrying. I can't stop worrying. Venerable Sobhita looked at him for a long moment, and Rahula saw something in the old monk's eyes that surprised him. Not anger. Not disappointment. Something that looked almost like recognition. After the meal, Sobhita said, Come find me in the garden. The rest of the alms round passed in a blur. Rahula barely noticed what food appeared in his bowl. Back at the monastery, he ate mechanically, the rice tasteless in his mouth. His thoughts now spinning around what Sobhita would say. He's going to tell you to leave. He's going to say you're not suited for monastic life. He's going to ask what's wrong with you. And what will you tell him? That you can't stop thinking, that your mind won't be quiet, that you're failing at the most basic practice. After the meal, Rahula walked slowly to the garden. It was a small space behind the main hall, where the monks grew vegetables and medicinal herbs. Sobhita was kneeling beside a row of bitter melon vines, his hands in the soil, pulling weeds. Sit, he said, not looking up. Rahula sat cross-legged on the ground nearby. his wet robe still clinging uncomfortably to his legs. For a long time, Sobita said nothing. He just kept weeding, his movements slow and deliberate, placing each pulled weed in a basket beside him. A bird called from the Bodhi tree. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. Finally, Sobhita sat back on his heels and looked at Rahula. His face was weathered, deeply lined, but his eyes were clear. "How many thoughts would you say you've had since sitting down?" he asked. Rahula blinked. I don't know. Venerable. Guess. I don't. Maybe 100? And how many of those thoughts were about this moment right here? About the feeling of the ground beneath you, the sound of that bird, the smell of the herbs? Rahula felt his cheeks flush with shame. None. Venerable. Where were they? They were... Rahula's voice cracked slightly. They were worrying about what you would say to me. About whether I should leave the monastery. About whether there's something wrong with me. Sobhita nodded slowly. He picked up a handful of soil and let it run through his fingers. Tell me, Rahula, this soil, is it in the past or the future? Neither. Venerable. It's here now. And this soil, is it in your head? Or in my hand? In your hand. Venerable. So where are your thoughts? In the past or the future? Rahula considered this. Some in the past, mostly in the future. And where are they happening? In the world. Or in your mind? In my mind. So, Sobhita brushed the soil from his hands. You're sitting here in the present moment, surrounded by what's actually happening. The ground, the bird, the herbs, the afternoon sun. But you're not experiencing any of it, because you're somewhere else entirely. You're in a future that hasn't happened, having conversations that haven't occurred, being rejected by people who haven't rejected you. Rahula felt tears prickling at his eyes. I can't stop it. Venerable. I've tried. I've tried to just watch my breath like we're taught, but the thoughts keep coming, and they feel so real, and they feel so important, and I can't breathe. Sobhita said gently, just breathe right now. Rahula took a shaky breath. Then another. When I was your age, Sobhita said, I worried about everything. Everything. I worried that I was worrying too much. I worried that other monks didn't worry as much as I did. I worried that my worry was a sign I was spiritually deficient. He smiled slightly. I worried myself into a state of such exhaustion that one day I simply collapsed during meditation. The abbot had to carry me to my sleeping mat. Rahula stared at him. You, Venerable? But you're always so calm. Now, yes. Then, no. Then I was exactly like you. A mind that wouldn't stop. Thoughts piling on thoughts. Every meditation session felt like failure because I couldn't make the thoughts go away. He paused. Do you know what the abbot told me when I woke up? Rahula shook his head. He said, Sobhita, you're fighting the wrong battle. What did he mean? He meant I was trying to stop thoughts from arising. Like trying to stop rain from falling. Like trying to stop that bird from singing. Thoughts arise. That's what minds do. The mind produces thoughts the way the eye produces seeing, the way the ear produces hearing. It's the mind's nature. But the Buddha taught that we can quiet the mind. Quiet. Yes. Not empty. Not blank. Not dead. Sobhita leaned forward. The Buddha taught us to understand the nature of thoughts, to see them clearly, to stop believing every single one is true and urgent and requires immediate action. I don't understand. Right now, Sobhita said. What are you thinking? Rahula hesitated. I'm thinking that I still don't understand, and that I'm probably not smart enough to understand, and that you're going to give up on me. And are those thoughts true? They feel true. Feelings and truth are not the same thing. Sobhita picked up a small stone from the ground. If I hold this stone and tell myself it's a precious jewel, does that make it one? No. Venerable. If I hold this stone and worry that it might be poisonous, does that make it poisonous? No. So the thought is just a thought. The stone remains a stone. He placed the stone in Rahula's palm. The problem isn't that you have worried thoughts. The problem is that you believe them. You treat them as facts. You let them pull you away from the only moment in which you're actually alive, this one. Rahula looked down at the stone in his hand. It was warm from sitting in the sun. Smooth, grey with flecks of white. Just a stone. But venerable, he said quietly. What if some of the worried thoughts are true? What if I really am failing at monastic practice? What if I really should leave? Sobhita smiled. And what if a tree falls in the forest tomorrow? What if the rice crop fails next season? What if the king declares war? What if? What if? What if? He shook his head. Rahula, you can spend your entire life living in what if, or you can live in what is. Not both. How do I choose what is? You don't choose it once. You choose it moment after moment after moment. Every time you notice you're lost in worried thoughts, you make a simple choice. Return to what's actually happening right now. He gestured around them. The ground beneath you, the breath moving in and out, the sensation of the stone in your hand, the sound of that bird. This is what is. Everything else is story. Rahula sat with this for a moment. The stone in his palm, the ground beneath him, the sound of the bird, now he really heard it. A clear, bright call. The smell of the bitter melon vines, slightly acrid and green. It won't be easy, Sobhita said. The habit of worrying is strong. The mind will pull you back into what if 1,000 times a day. But each time you notice it happening and choose to return to what is, you weaken that habit. You strengthen a different muscle. The muscle of presence, of clarity, of peace. And the thoughts will stop, the thoughts will keep coming. But you'll stop fighting them. You'll stop believing them. You'll see them the way you see clouds passing through the sky. Interesting, perhaps, but not solid, not permanent, not the truth of who you are. Rahula felt something shift in his chest. Not peace, exactly, not the end of worry, but something like a small door opening, a glimpse of possibility. Venerable, he said. I stepped in that puddle this morning because I was completely lost in my thoughts. I wasn't here at all. I know. Doesn't that mean I'm a bad monk? It means you're a monk who is learning. Just like I was. Just like we all are. Sobhita stood slowly, his knees creaking. Come. Let's finish weeding this garden. And while we work, practice being here. Just here. When thoughts come, and they will notice them, and then return to the feeling of your hands in the soil, the smell of the earth, the sight of the weeds and the vegetables. return and return and return. That's the practice. They worked side by side for the next hour as the sun moved across the sky. Rahula's thoughts still came. What if I'm pulling the wrong plants? What if I'm too slow? What if but now? When he noticed them, he would pause, take a breath, and return to the sensation of his hands in the warm soil, the smell of crushed leaves, the sight of roots loosening from earth. It wasn't perfect. His mind still wandered, but something had changed. The thoughts no longer felt like prison walls. They felt more like weather passing through, but not defining everything. That evening, during meditation, Rahula sat in the main hall with the other monks. The thoughts still came. You're not doing this right. Everyone else is deeper in meditation. You're wasting your time. But this time, instead of fighting the thoughts or believing them or following them into their worried futures, Rahula simply noticed, there's a worried thought. And he would return to the sensation of breathing. The cool air entering his nostrils, the slight expansion of his chest, the warm air leaving his body. A thought would arise, but you're still not doing it right, and he would return to the breath. Another thought, what if you never return to the breath? What if return? What return? The thoughts kept coming. But between them, in the spaces where he returned to the simple reality of breathing, sitting, being present in those spaces, Rahula tasted something he hadn't felt in years. Something that felt almost like relief. We so often think that peace means the absence of worried thoughts, don't we? That if we could just make the mind stop chattering, stop spinning its anxious stories, then we'd finally be okay. We tell ourselves, I'll be at peace when the thoughts stop. But what if peace isn't the absence of thoughts? What if peace is learning to live alongside them without being controlled by them? Think about it in your own life. How many hours have you spent lost in worried thoughts about things that haven't happened yet? You lie awake at night, running through conversations that might occur tomorrow. You replay mistakes from the past, over and over, as if thinking about them enough will somehow change what happened. You spin stories about worst-case scenarios, and your body responds as if those scenarios are happening right now. Heart racing, chest tight, breath shallow. And here's what makes it so exhausting. You're not actually experiencing whatever you're worried about. You're experiencing your thoughts about it. The worried thought feels so real, so urgent, so important that it pulls you completely out of the present moment. You miss the actual texture of your life, the feeling of cool sheets, the sound of night settling, the simple miracle of breathing, because you're somewhere else entirely. You're in a future that doesn't exist yet, fighting battles that may never come. Here's the shift that Rahula discovered, and that we can discover too. Thoughts are just thoughts. They're not facts. They're not commands. They're not predictions of the future. They're mental events that arise and pass away, like clouds moving through the sky. The worried thought that says, something terrible is going to happen, is just that, a thought. It's not a prophecy. It's not the truth. It's a pattern your mind has learned, probably because at some point in your life, worry seemed like protection. But worry isn't protection. Worry is suffering added to suffering. It's the second arrow, as the Buddha taught. The first arrow is whatever difficult thing is happening or might happen. The second arrow is all the mental anguish we create around it, the stories, the catastrophizing, the endless what-ifs. The first arrow may be unavoidable. The second arrow is optional. So what do we do with worried thoughts? Not fight them. Fighting thoughts just makes them stronger. Like trying to push beach balls underwater, they keep popping back up. Not believe them automatically. Just because a thought appears in your mind doesn't make it true. Instead, we practice what Rahula learned. We notice them and we return. Notice the worried thought. There's my mind telling me something bad might happen. Don't argue with it. Don't analyze it. Don't try to figure out if it's true. Just notice it the way you'd notice a car passing by on the street. And then return. Return to what's actually happening right now. The sensation of your body in bed. The feeling of breath moving through you. The temperature of the air on your skin. This is what is. Everything else is story. You might have to do this 100 times in an hour. 1,000 times in a night. That's okay. Each time you notice you're lost in worried thoughts and choose to return to the present moment, you're practicing. You're training your mind in a new way of being. You're weakening the habit of worry and strengthening the muscle of presence. Let your shoulders drop just a little bit. Feel the weight of your head sinking into the pillow. Notice how your chest rises and falls with each breath. You're not making it happen. It's just happening. Your body knows how to breathe. Your body knows how to rest. It's your worried mind that's keeping you awake. And worried mind is just weather. Just clouds. Just thoughts arising and passing away. What if thoughts will come? Let them come. Notice them like you'd notice distant thunder, and then return to the simple reality of this moment. The cool pillow against your cheek, the darkness behind your closed eyelids, the gentle rhythm of your breathing. This is what is. This is where peace lives. Not in the absence of thoughts, but in the choice to return, again and again, to the only moment you're actually alive in this one. Breathe deeply now, letting that understanding settle somewhere deeper than thought. Feel your body becoming a little heavier, a little softer. As you release each breath, imagine releasing just a bit of that need to figure everything out, to worry everything through. You don't have to carry that burden right now. And as the mind learns this gentle art of returning, of noticing without fighting, we travel now to a mountain monastery where another seeker discovered something essential about the nature of thoughts, not through pushing them away, but through understanding what makes them so persistent in the first place. In 13th century Japan, in a small temple on the outskirts of Kyoto, a young monk named Kensho sat in the meditation hall night after night. His mind, a battlefield he couldn't escape. The temple was called Kannon-ji, named after the Bodhisattva of compassion, and it sat at the edge of a bamboo forest that whispered constantly in the wind. Kensho had come here 6 months ago, full of determination to practice Zen meditation under the guidance of an old teacher everyone called simply Roshi. The meditation hall was austere, bare wooden floors, polished smooth by decades of monks sitting, walls the color of aged paper, and narrow windows that let in stripes of morning light. Kensho had been a scholar before becoming a monk. At 18, he'd been known throughout his village as the young man who could memorize entire texts after reading them once, who could debate classical philosophy with visiting monks 3 times his age. His family had been proud. His teachers had predicted a brilliant future. But Kensho had felt something was missing. All that knowledge sat in his head like stones in a bag, heavy, disconnected, somehow beside the point of actually living. So he'd left his studies and come to Kannon-ji to learn meditation. He'd thought it would be simple: sit still, watch the breath, attain peace. Instead, he'd discovered something unexpected and deeply troubling. His brilliant, well-trained mind had become his greatest obstacle. Every morning at 4, the monks would gather in the meditation hall. They would sit in perfect rows on their cushions, facing the wall, backs straight, hands folded in their laps. The roshi would ring a small bell, and the sitting would begin. The instruction was simple: just sit. Let thoughts come and go like clouds. Don't grab them. Don't push them away. Just sit. But Kensho couldn't just sit. The moment he settled into his posture and closed his eyes, his mind erupted into activity. It was the same every single time. First would come the thought, I need to sit perfectly still. Then, is my back straight enough? Is it too straight? The monk next to me looks more relaxed. Then, I shouldn't be thinking about the monk next to me. I should be watching my breath. Then, but how do you watch your breath without thinking about watching your breath? Then, this is ridiculous. I've been sitting for 3 months and I still can't stop thinking. Everyone else must be able to do this. Why can't I? There must be something wrong with me. And then, inevitably, the worst thought of all, I'm failing at meditation. I'm not cut out for this. I should just go back to being a scholar. At least I was good at that. This exact sequence of thoughts happened every morning. Every single morning. Kensho had started to recognize it. This pattern. Like a worn path, his mind walked down automatically. He would sit down on his cushion, and before his breath even settled, the thoughts would begin their familiar march. Perfection worry. Comparison worry. Method worry. Self-judgment worry. Failure worry. Sometimes he tried to fight the pattern. He would sit down with fierce determination. Today will be different. Today, I won't let these thoughts take over. But that very determination became another thought to worry about. Am I trying too hard? The Roshi said not to make effort. But how can you not make effort? Isn't sitting here itself effort? Other times, he tried to ignore the thoughts entirely. He would focus intensely on his breath, counting each inhale and exhale with mathematical precision. 1, 2, 3, 4. But by the time he reached 7, he'd be thinking, I'm counting too mechanically. This isn't real meditation. Real meditation is supposed to be natural, not forced. And the pattern would start again. What tormented Kensho most was that he could see the pattern. He could watch himself thinking the same thoughts in the same order, day after day, and he couldn't stop it. It was like being trapped in a play where he knew all the lines but had to speak them anyway. His brilliant analytical mind, the very thing that had made him a good scholar, now turned itself endlessly on the question of why he couldn't meditate properly, which of course prevented him from meditating at all. One morning, after an especially frustrating meditation session, Kensho stayed in the hall after the other monks had left for their work duties. He sat alone on his cushion, feeling defeated. The early light slanted through the windows, illuminating particles of dust floating in the air. He watched them drift, appearing and disappearing in the light's path, and felt tears of frustration prickling at his eyes. The Roshi must have noticed Kensho hadn't left, because the old teacher appeared in the doorway. He was small and thin, his robes hanging loose on his frame, his head shaved, his eyes quick and bright despite his age. He said nothing, just walked slowly to where Kensho sat and lowered himself onto a cushion nearby with a soft grunt. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, a crow called. The bamboo forest whispered. Kensho could hear the other monks working in the garden, the rhythmic sound of a hoe striking earth. Finally, Kensho spoke. Roshi, I can't do this. His voice sounded thick. Every time I sit, the same thoughts come. The same exact thoughts, in the same exact order. I try to stop them, and I can't. I try to ignore them, and they get louder. I can see the pattern, but seeing it doesn't change it. I think maybe I'm just not capable of meditation. My mind is too, he stopped, not sure how to finish. Too busy, too broken, too clever for its own good? Too what? The Roshi asked mildly. Too something. Too active. Maybe. Too analytical. I can't seem to just sit the way you describe. The way the others seem to be able to. The others, the Roshi repeated. You can see inside their minds? Well, no. But you're sure they're doing it correctly and you're not? Kensho hesitated. They look peaceful. I don't feel peaceful. The Roshi nodded slowly. Tell me about these same thoughts that come every time. So Kensho explained the pattern. The worry about posture, the comparison to other monks, the anxiety about the method, the self-judgment, the final conclusion of failure. He laid it out like the scholar he used to be, organizing the thoughts into a clear sequence. When he finished, the Roshi was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, and when did this pattern start? The first week I arrived. It's been the same ever since. The same thoughts in the same order? Yes. And you've been sitting every morning for 6 months? Yes. Roshi, so you've repeated this pattern, what would you say, 180 times? Kensho did the math. More or less. Yes. The Roshi leaned forward slightly. Kensho, do you know what you're doing? Kensho felt his cheeks flush. Failing at meditation? No. The old teacher's voice was gentle but firm. You're practicing. Practicing? But I'm thinking the same. You're practicing the pattern. Every morning, you sit down and you practice thinking these exact thoughts in this exact order. You're very good at it now. After 180 repetitions, you could probably do it in your sleep. The Roshi's eyes held a hint of something that might have been amusement. You have become a master of this particular pattern of worry. Kensho stared at him. But that's not what I want to practice. I know, but it's what you have been practicing. And the mind is a very good student. Whatever you practice, you get better at. You have practiced this pattern so thoroughly that it's now a habit. It runs automatically. You don't even have to think about thinking these thoughts anymore. They just appear, exactly on schedule. Kensho felt something shift in his chest. So what do I do? How do I stop practicing the pattern? The Roshi held up a finger. This is the key question, but the answer may surprise you. You don't stop the pattern by fighting it. Fighting it is just another form of practicing it. Every time you sit down and try not to think these thoughts, every time you tense up and push against them, you're actually reinforcing them. You're practicing the pattern even more. Then how? You practice something different. Not instead of the pattern. Alongside it. Kensho shook his head. I don't understand. The Roshi settled back on his cushion. Let me ask you this. When you sit down tomorrow morning and the first thought comes, I need to sit perfectly still, what happens? I notice it. And then I feel frustrated. And then, stop. Right there. You notice it. That's the first thing that happens. You notice the thought. Yes, and in order to notice the thought, there must be something doing the noticing. Something aware of the thought. What is that? Kensho paused. He'd never considered this. I don't know. My mind, your mind is having the thought. But something is watching the mind have the thought. What is the watcher? Kensho sat with this. The watching, yes. There was a quality of awareness that observed the thoughts, that knew they were happening. It was so obvious he'd never noticed it before, or rather, he'd noticed it but had never paid attention to it. I see it, he said slowly. There's the thinking, and there's the knowing about the thinking. Yes. And which one is the problem? The thinking. Is it? Or is the problem that all your attention goes to the thinking, and none goes to the knowing? Kensho felt as if a door had opened slightly. You're saying, I should pay attention to the awareness instead of the thoughts. I'm saying that when you sit tomorrow morning, and the pattern starts because it will start. It's a habit now. You practice noticing it, not fighting it, not analyzing it, not trying to change it. Just, there's that thought about posture. There's the thought comparing myself to others. There's the judgment. There's the conclusion of failure. Just notice each thought the way you might notice that crow outside. The crow caws. The thought appears. Both are just events happening. Neither requires your participation. But don't I have to do something with the thoughts? That's the pattern talking. The pattern says thoughts are problems that need solving. But thoughts are just thoughts. They arise. They stay for a moment. They pass away. Like dust, floating in sunlight. The Roshi gestured at the particles still drifting in the light from the window. Does the dust need your help to move? Does it ask your permission to appear or disappear? No. Thoughts are the same. They don't need you to manage them. They will appear and disappear on their own. Your job is not to get involved. Just notice. There's a thought. There's another thought. There's a feeling. There's a sensation. Keep coming back to that simple noticing. That's the practice. But what about the pattern? Won't it just keep happening for a while? Yes. It's a habit. Habits have momentum. But here's what changes. Every time you notice the pattern without getting pulled into it, without adding more thoughts about the thoughts, without fighting or analyzing or judging every time, you just notice and return to simple awareness. You're weakening the pattern. You're not feeding it. And you're practicing something new, the practice of noticing without involvement. The practice of awareness itself. Kensho felt something loosening in his chest. So I don't have to make the thoughts stop? Making thoughts stop is impossible. The mind produces thoughts the way the eyes produce seeing. As long as you're conscious, thoughts will arise. But you don't have to give them all your attention. You don't have to believe every thought is true and important. You don't have to follow them wherever they want to take you. What do I do when I get pulled into the pattern anyway? Because I know I will. The Roshi smiled. When you notice you've been pulled in, and this is important, don't judge yourself for it. Don't think, I failed again. That's just more pattern. Instead, simply notice, I got pulled into the pattern. And now I'm noticing that I got pulled in. And then gently, like setting down something fragile, return to just sitting. Return to simple awareness. No drama. No self-criticism. Just return. How many times? As many times as it takes. 10 times in one sitting. 100 times. 1,000. Each time you notice and return, you're practicing not the old pattern, the new practice, the practice of awareness, of freedom, They sat together in silence as the morning light grew stronger. Kensho felt something he hadn't felt in months, a small sense of possibility. Not certainty, not the absence of the worried thoughts. Just possibility that maybe the pattern wasn't a wall but a teacher, showing him exactly where his mind got stuck, giving him endless opportunities to practice something different. Tomorrow morning, the Roshi said, rising slowly from his cushion, when you sit down and the pattern starts, try saying this to yourself. Here is the pattern. Thank you for showing me where to practice. He bowed slightly. The pattern is not your enemy. It's your curriculum. The next morning, Kensho sat in the meditation hall with the other monks. The bell rang. He settled into his posture and closed his eyes. Within seconds, the familiar thought arose. I need to sit perfectly still. But this time, instead of tensing up, instead of following the thought into the familiar spiral, Kensho noticed something new. There was the thought. And there was the awareness of the thought. And there was a tiny space between them, a space where he could choose. He practiced noticing. There's a thought about posture. The thought kept going, trying to pull him into worry, but he didn't follow. He just kept noticing. There's a thought comparing myself to others. There's a judgment. There's anxiety. The pattern still ran its course. It was too ingrained to simply disappear. But something had shifted. He was watching it now, not from inside it, but from a small distance, like watching clouds cross the sky instead of being inside the storm. And when he got pulled back into the pattern, which happened many times that morning, he practiced what the Roshi had taught him. No judgment. Just notice. Just return. Gently, like setting down something fragile. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was something new. It was practice. Here's something most of us don't realize until we sit still long enough to notice. We're not thinking our thoughts. We're practicing them. Practicing them over and over until they become habits so automatic we don't even recognize them anymore. Think about your own mind right now. If you pay close attention, you might notice you have certain thoughts that show up again and again, especially when you're anxious or can't sleep. Maybe it's, I'm not good enough. Maybe it's, something bad is going to happen. Maybe it's a whole sequence of thoughts that roll through like a familiar script. Worry about work. Worry about money. Worry about health. Worry about what people think of you. These aren't random thoughts appearing out of nowhere. They're patterns. Habits. Neural pathways you've walked down so many times that your mind just automatically goes there. The same way your feet know the path from your bedroom to the bathroom in the dark. And here's what makes it so tricky. You probably developed these patterns for a reason. At some point in your life, worry might have helped you prepare for challenges. Self-criticism might have pushed you to improve. Anxious planning might have prevented mistakes. These thought patterns were solutions once, but now they run automatically. Even when they're not helpful anymore. Even when they're keeping you awake at 3 in the morning, spinning the same worries you've spun 1,000 times before. The breakthrough that Kensho discovered, and that we can discover too, is this. You're not broken because you have repetitive thought patterns. You have them because you've practiced them. And anything you've learned through practice, you can unlearn through different practice. But, and this is crucial, you don't unlearn it by fighting it. Fighting a thought pattern is just practicing it in a different way. When you lie in bed thinking, I shouldn't be thinking about this. I need to stop thinking about this. Why can't I stop thinking about this? You're still thinking about it. You're still on the thought treadmill. You've just added extra thoughts about the thoughts. The way out is the same thing Kensho learned, noticing without getting involved. This is harder than it sounds, because we're so used to thinking that every thought requires our participation. A worried thought appears, and we immediately start problem-solving, analyzing, arguing with it, trying to figure out if it's true, what we should do about it. But what if we practice something different? What if, when the familiar thought pattern starts its run, we simply notice, oh, there's that pattern again. There's the thought about not being good enough. There's the thought about what people think of me. There's the judgment about having these thoughts in the first place. Just noticing, not analyzing why the thought appeared, not trying to make it go away, not believing it or disbelieving it. Just, there's a thought. The same way you might notice, there's a sound of a car passing. The car passes. You don't get in it and go for a ride. The thought appears. You don't have to follow it. This is what awareness practice looks like. There's the thinking happening, the pattern running its course, and there's the awareness that knows the thinking is happening. And it turns out that the awareness itself doesn't suffer. The awareness just notices. It's only when we get completely identified with the thinking, when we believe we are the worried thoughts, that we suffer. Let your shoulders soften as you consider this. Your worried thoughts might still be there, the pattern might still be running. But you're not just your thoughts, you're also the awareness that notices them. And that awareness is spacious enough to hold all the thoughts without being troubled by them. This doesn't mean the patterns will disappear overnight. Kensho's pattern of meditation anxiety didn't vanish after one conversation with the Roshi. It kept appearing, morning after morning, because it was deeply practiced. But each time he noticed it without getting hooked, each time he returned to simple awareness. He was practicing something new, weakening the old groove, creating a new possibility. You can do the same. Tonight, lying here, when the familiar worried thoughts begin their run, and they probably will, you can practice noticing, not fighting, not judging yourself for having them again. Just gently noticing, there's that pattern. There's my mind doing its habitual thing. And then, just as gently, returning your attention to something simpler, the feeling of breathing, the weight of your body on the bed, the darkness behind your closed eyes. The pattern might keep going in the background, that's okay. You're not trying to control it. You're just practicing noticing it without getting pulled in. And every single time you do that, even for a moment, you're creating a tiny bit of space, a tiny bit of freedom, a tiny bit less fuel for the pattern. Feel your breathing now, steady and quiet. The thoughts will keep arising, that's what minds do. But you don't have to practice the old patterns anymore. You can practice something new. Practice awareness. Practice noticing. Practice the gentle return to presence. That's the curriculum. That's the practice. That's the way through. Let your breath carry you deeper now, beneath the thoughts, beneath the patterns, into the simple quiet of being here. Your body knows how to rest even when your mind is busy. Feel yourself becoming heavier, softer, more settled. And as thoughts continue to drift through like weather passing through a valley, we journey now to a mountain monastery in China, where a master taught his students that the mind is not the thoughts it produces, it's the vast sky in which thoughts arise and dissolve like morning mist. In 9th century China, in the mountains of Jiangxi province, there was a monastery where a Chan master named Wen Xin taught a small group of monks. The monastery was built on a slope facing east, so that every morning the rising sun would first touch the meditation hall's wooden beams, then slowly fill the courtyard where a single plum tree grew. Wenqin was not famous beyond his mountain. He had no royal patrons, no wealthy sponsors, no crowds of students, just 7 monks who had found their way to this remote place, drawn by rumors of a teacher who taught what he called the ordinary way, though what was ordinary about it, none of them could quite explain. Among these 7 was a young monk named Jiang, who had come to the monastery 8 months earlier, carrying a burden that had grown too heavy to bear alone. Jiang was 25 years old, and his mind had become, as he described it to anyone who would listen, a prison of its own making. Before becoming a monk, Jiang had been a government clerk in a provincial town, the kind of position that required endless precision and attention to detail. He had spent his days copying legal documents, recording tax assessments, tracking grain shipments. His superiors had valued him for his meticulous nature, the way he could spot a single misplaced character in pages of dense text. But what had been an asset in his work had become torture in his life. Jiang's mind had learned to find problems, to notice what was wrong, to anticipate what might go wrong, and it had gotten so good at this that it couldn't stop. Even after he left his position and came to the monastery, the habit remained. His mind constantly scanned for errors, for dangers, for things that needed fixing. During meditation, instead of finding peace, Jiang would notice the creak of a floorboard and think, that board is loose. Someone should repair it before it breaks and causes injury. Then he'd think, but no one else seems concerned. Should I mention it? If I mention it, will they think I'm not focused on practice? If I don't mention it and someone gets hurt, won't that be my fault? And then, why am I thinking about this instead of meditating? What's wrong with me that I can't stop thinking about problems? It was exhausting. Every moment became an opportunity to find something wrong, something that needed attention, something that could go badly. And worse, Jiang believed this was his responsibility. His mind presented each worry as important, urgent, something he needed to solve right now. One autumn evening, after the evening meditation, Jiang stayed behind in the hall. He sat alone as darkness gathered, his shoulders tight with frustration. Master Wenqin found him there an hour later, still sitting in the dim light of a single oil lamp. "Still working?" Wenqin asked, his voice gentle. Jiang looked up, startled. "I'm not working, Master. I'm trying to meditate." "Ah." It looked like work. Wenqin sat down on a cushion nearby, moving slowly, his joints making small sounds. He was perhaps 60 years old, with deep lines around his eyes and a calm that Jiang envied. "What kind of work are you doing?" "I'm trying to fix my mind." "Fix it? Is it broken?" Jiang felt heat rise to his face. "You know what I mean, Master. I can't stop thinking. I can't stop worrying. Every time I sit down to meditate, my mind finds 100 things to worry about. Loose floorboards, rice supplies, whether I bowed correctly this morning, whether the other monks think I'm practicing properly. It never stops." Your mind is very busy. Too busy. I need to make it stop. I need to find peace. Isn't that what we're supposed to do here? Find peace? Wenqin was quiet for a moment, looking at the lamp flame. "Jiang, have you been outside today?" The question seemed to come from nowhere. "Outside? Yes, Master. For work practice this morning. Did you look at the sky? I suppose so. Briefly. What did it look like?" Jiang tried to remember. Clear. I think some clouds. And the sky, was it disturbed by the clouds? Disturbed? No. Master. It's just sky. Just sky. Wenxin repeated. The clouds pass through it, but the sky isn't disturbed. It doesn't try to push the clouds away. It doesn't worry about whether there are too many clouds or the wrong kind of clouds. It just remains sky, while the clouds do what clouds do. Jiang frowned, trying to understand where this was going. Wenxin continued. Tomorrow morning, before the morning bell, I want you to go outside and look at the sky. Really look at it. Watch it for at least the time it takes to brew tea. Don't meditate. Don't try to empty your mind. Just look at the sky. Can you do that? Yes, Master. But I don't understand. Good. Don't try to understand. Just look. The next morning, Jiang rose before dawn and made his way outside. The air was cold and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant smell of wood smoke from the kitchen. He stood in the courtyard, tilted his head back, and looked up. The sky was still dark, deep indigo fading to lighter blue at the eastern horizon. A few stars were still visible, though they were disappearing as the light grew. Clouds moved slowly overhead, thin, wispy clouds like brush strokes on silk. Jiang watched them. He'd looked at the sky countless times in his life, but he'd never really looked. The clouds drifted from west to east, changing shape as they moved. One looked like a crane. Then it didn't. Then it looked like a mountain. Then it didn't. The sky itself didn't move. It just held the clouds, let them pass through, remained vast and open no matter what crossed it. After a while, Jiang's neck got tired, so he sat down on the ground, leaning back against the monastery wall, still gazing upward. The stars had all gone now. The sky had turned from indigo to pale blue. More clouds were forming, thicker ones, bringing the promise of rain later in the day. A thought arose in his mind. I should go inside. The morning bell will ring soon. He noticed the thought the way he might notice a bird flying overhead. There it was. Just a thought passing through. Another thought. This is strange. I'm supposed to be meditating, not staring at the sky. Another bird. Another cloud. What if the master thinks I'm wasting time? Another thought, drifting through the space of his mind. Something shifted in Jiang's chest. These thoughts, they were just like the clouds. They appeared, they drifted through, they disappeared. And the space in which they appeared, the mind itself, it was like the sky. Vast, open, untroubled by whatever passed through it. The morning bell rang. Jiang stood slowly, still looking at the sky, and walked to the meditation hall. That evening, after meditation, he found Master Wenxin in the garden, pulling weeds from around the herbs. Master, Jiang said, I saw something this morning. Wenxin continued weeding. Tell me, the thoughts, they're like clouds. They just pass through. And the mind is like the sky. Yes. And I don't have to do anything with them? With the thoughts? Do you have to do anything with clouds? No. Do the clouds need your permission to form or dissolve? No. Does the sky fight with the clouds, trying to push them away? No. Does the sky cling to beautiful clouds, trying to make them stay forever? No. Then why does your mind try to fight with thoughts? Why does it try to push away unpleasant thoughts and cling to pleasant ones? Jiang felt something open inside him, not dramatically, just a small loosening. Because I thought that was my job. To control them. To fix them. To make the bad ones go away and keep the good ones. That's a lot of work. It's exhausting. Yes. Wen Xin sat back on his heels, looking at the herbs he'd been tending. You know, Jiang, your mind is not actually broken. It's doing exactly what minds do, producing thoughts. Worried thoughts, peaceful thoughts, important thoughts, trivial thoughts. The mind makes thoughts the way the eyes make seeing, the way ears make hearing. It's the mind's nature. But some minds seem more peaceful than mine. Some skies have more clouds than others. Does that mean cloudy skies are broken? Jiang smiled slightly despite himself. No, the problem isn't the thoughts, Jiang. The problem is what you're doing with them. You're treating every thought as if it requires immediate attention. Every worry as if it's an emergency. Every passing notion as if it's a command you must obey. But what if the thoughts are about real problems, like the loose floorboard that really could hurt someone? And if you notice the loose floorboard while you're walking, by all means, mention it to whoever maintains the hall. But when you're sitting in meditation and the thought of the loose floorboard arises, what can you do about it in that moment? Nothing. Exactly. Nothing. So the thought can just be a cloud passing through the sky of your mind. You notice it. There's a thought about the loose floorboard. And then it passes. Later, when you're walking and you see the actual floorboard, you can take actual action. But during meditation, during this very moment, thoughts about things that aren't happening right now, they're just clouds. Over the following weeks, Jiang practiced this new understanding. Every morning before the bell, he would go outside and watch the sky, reminding himself of its nature, vast, open, untroubled by whatever passed through it. Then he would carry that awareness into meditation. Thoughts still arose. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Worried thoughts about things that might go wrong. Critical thoughts about his practice. Anxious thoughts about the future. Planning thoughts. Remembering thoughts. Judging thoughts. But now, instead of engaging with each one, instead of trying to fix or solve or push them away, Jiang would notice them the way he'd learned to notice clouds, thought about rice supplies, thought about whether I'm doing this correctly, thought about tomorrow, and like clouds, they would drift through and dissolve. It wasn't perfect. Many times, he'd get caught up in a thought, following it into its familiar worried spiral, before he'd realize what had happened. But when he realized, instead of judging himself for getting caught, which was just another thought, another cloud, he would simply notice, got caught in thinking, now noticing, now returning to sky mind. One morning, several weeks into this practice, Jiang was sitting in meditation when a familiar worried thought arose. What if I'm not getting enlightened? What if I'm wasting my time here? Before, this thought would have sent him into a spiral of anxiety. But this time, something different happened. He noticed the thought, worry thought about enlightenment, and in the space of noticing, he realized something profound. The worrying mind, the thinking mind, was just cloud weather happening in the vast sky of awareness. But his true nature, was the sky itself. Spacious, clear, untroubled. The thoughts could never damage the sky. They could pass through it, even fill it completely, but they could never stain it. Never diminish it. Never make it anything other than what it was. Vast, open space. He wasn't his thoughts. He was the space in which thoughts arose. The realization brought tears to his eyes. Though he wasn't sad, it was more like recognition. Like coming home to something he'd always been but had forgotten. After meditation, he found Master Wenshin sweeping leaves from the courtyard. "Master," Jiang said, and his voice caught slightly. "I'm not my thoughts." Wenshin stopped sweeping and looked at him. A smile creased the old teacher's face. "No, you're not. I'm the sky. You're the awareness." "Yes, all this time, I've been trying to fix the clouds. But the sky doesn't need fixing. Never did." Jiang felt laughter bubble up, not at anything funny, but from pure relief. It's so simple. Very simple. And also very easy to forget. You'll probably forget it many times. And then remember again. And forget. And remember. That's also clouds passing through sky. What do I do when I forget? Same thing the sky does when it's covered in clouds. Wenshin resumed sweeping. Nothing. Just remain sky. The clouds will pass. From that day forward, Jiang's practice changed. He still had a busy mind that didn't disappear. Worried thoughts still arose. His old patterns of anxious thinking still played out sometimes. But now there was space around them. Now he knew he was the sky, not the clouds. And that knowing made all the difference. Years later, when Jiang himself became a teacher, he would often take his students outside on cloudy days. They would stand together looking up, watching the weather cross the vastness overhead. And Jiang would say, "This is your mind, not the clouds. The sky. Always the sky." There's something liberating about understanding this truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear and disappear. You are the sky, not the clouds. Think about what happens when you lie awake at night, caught in worried thinking. A thought appears, "What if I can't handle tomorrow?" And immediately you believe it. You become it. You get pulled into it. You start planning how to handle tomorrow, or worrying that you won't be able to, or remembering times you didn't handle things well. The thought has grabbed you and taken you on a journey far from this moment, far from this bed, far from the simple reality of breathing in darkness. But what if you could notice that thought the way you notice a cloud passing overhead? What if instead of becoming the thought, you simply observed it? There's a worried thought about tomorrow. Not grabbing it. Not fighting it. Not following it wherever it wants to take you. Just noticing thought. And then, maybe, another thought appears. But what if the worry is important? Notice that one too. Another cloud passing through. The mind produces thoughts. That's what it does. It's not broken when it produces worried thoughts, any more than the sky is broken when it produces clouds. Some days are cloudier than others. Some minds produce more anxious thoughts than others. That's just the weather of your particular consciousness. It doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. Here's what changes everything. You don't have to manage the weather. You don't have to fight the clouds or cling to clear skies. You can just be the space in which weather happens. Vast, open, untroubled. This doesn't mean you ignore real problems. When you notice the loose floorboard while you're walking, fix it. When you have a genuine decision to make tomorrow, make it. But right now, lying here at 3 in the morning, when the worried thought about tomorrow arises, it's just a cloud. You can notice it, Let it drift through the vast space of your awareness and return to the simple reality of this moment. The feeling of your body resting, the sound of your breath, the darkness held gently by your closed eyes. Most of our suffering comes from fighting with clouds. We think, I shouldn't have this anxious thought. What's wrong with me that I'm thinking about this again? If I were really practicing correctly, I wouldn't have these thoughts. But those are just more clouds. Clouds about clouds. Weather systems judging other weather systems. What if you stopped fighting, not giving up, not surrendering to the worried thoughts and letting them run your life, but stopping the fight, stopping the exhausting work of trying to push thoughts away or make them stay or figure out why they're there or fix the mind that's producing them. Just let the mind be the sky. Let the thoughts be clouds. Notice each one as it passes. Worry thought, planning thought, judging thought, anxious thought about being anxious. And each time you notice without getting pulled in, without adding more thoughts about the thoughts, you're resting as awareness itself. You're being the sky. Feel your chest rise and fall. There's breathing happening. The body knows how to breathe without your worried thoughts helping. The heart knows how to beat. The cells know how to renew themselves. All of this is happening in the vast space of awareness that you are. Thoughts will keep coming, that's guaranteed. Some of them will be worried thoughts, because you're human and you care about things, and the mind tries to protect you by anticipating problems. Let them come. They're just clouds. They can't hurt the sky. They can't diminish the vastness of awareness. They can pass right through without leaving a trace. You don't have to wait until the thoughts stop to find peace. The sky doesn't wait until all the clouds are gone to be the sky. It's the sky right now, with all the clouds present. You are awareness right now, with all the thoughts present. Nothing to fix, nothing to change, nothing to push away. Just this vast, open, untroubled space in which everything arises and passes away. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw unclench. The worried thoughts might still be there, drifting through like weather. That's okay. You're not the weather. You're the sky that holds it all. Vast enough for every thought. Spacious enough for every worry. Clear and open and untroubled at your very core. Breathe into that spaciousness now, feeling yourself expand beyond the boundaries of thinking, into the vast awareness that has always been here, watching everything come and go. Your body settles deeper into rest as you recognize you don't have to solve the thoughts. They solve themselves by passing through, and as the sky mind opens wider, holding all things lightly, we travel now across the sea to a Vietnamese monastery where a young monk discovered that the path to peace isn't found by escaping the present moment, but by arriving in it so fully that there's no room left for worry. In a monastery in central Vietnam in the 1950s, during a time when the country was caught between war and the hope for peace, there lived a young monk named Min. The monastery, Tu Hio Temple, near the ancient city of Hu, sat among pine trees and bamboo groves, its curved tile roofs echoing the shape of the mountains beyond. Min was 23 years old and had been a monk for 2 years. He had come to the monastery seeking refuge from a mind that gave him no rest, even in this peaceful place, surrounded by the chanting of sutras and the gentle discipline of monastic life. Min's thoughts raced ahead of him constantly, planning, worrying, rehearsing conversations that hadn't happened yet. The monastery followed a rhythm as old as the tradition itself. Wake at 4 in the morning for meditation. Chanting. Breakfast eaten in silence. Work practice tending the vegetable garden, cleaning the meditation hall, preparing meals. More meditation, more chanting, study, rest. Evening meditation, sleep, day after day, the same rhythm, and Min found it both comforting and frustrating. Comforting because he knew what would happen next. Frustrating because even with this predictable schedule, his mind refused to settle. During meditation, while the other monks sat peacefully, Min's thoughts would leap forward. After this sitting, I need to finish sweeping the courtyard. But wait, did I finish yesterday's task of organizing the library? If I didn't, the senior monk will be disappointed. Should I do that first? But then the sweeping won't get done. Maybe I can do both quickly. But what if I rush and do neither well? During meals, while he was supposed to eat mindfully, aware of each bite, Min would be thinking about the afternoon's schedule or replaying a conversation from the morning, wondering if he'd said something wrong, planning what he should have said instead. During work practice in the garden, pulling weeds, he'd be mentally rehearsing his evening study session, worrying about whether he understood the texts well enough, anxious about looking foolish if asked a question. His mind was never where his body was. It was always somewhere else in the past, analyzing what had happened, or in the future, preparing for what might happen. The present moment, the only moment actually happening, slipped through his fingers like water. One afternoon, Min was assigned to work in the kitchen with Thầy Hien, an old monk who had been at the monastery for 40 years. Thầy Hien was known for moving slowly and deliberately, for smiling often, and for rarely speaking. The kitchen assignment was to prepare vegetables for the evening meal, washing lettuce, peeling carrots, chopping cabbage. Min approached the task with his usual mental distance. As he washed lettuce leaves under the pump, his mind was elsewhere. I need to finish this quickly so I can study before evening meditation. But I should also check on the progress of memorizing the Heart Sutra. Am I memorizing it fast enough? The other young monks seem to know it already. Why am I so slow? Maybe I'm not practicing hard enough. Maybe I should. Ming? Thầy Hien's voice, quiet and warm. Min looked up. The old monk was standing beside him, holding a carrot, looking at him with gentle eyes. Are you washing the lettuce? Thầy Hien asked. Min looked down at his hands. Water was running over the lettuce leaves, but he realized he hadn't actually been paying attention. He'd washed the same leaf multiple times while his mind wandered. I'm sorry, Thầy. I was thinking. I know. Where were you? I was thinking about studying later, and about memorizing the sutra, and about Thầy Hien held up his hand, gently. All very important things, I'm sure. But where is the lettuce? The lettuce? Yes. Where is it? Min looked down at the green leaves in his hands. Here. In my hands. And where is your mind? Min felt his face grow warm. Somewhere else. Yes. So who is washing the lettuce? Min had no answer. Thầy Hien set down his carrot and came to stand beside Min at the pump. May I show you something? He picked up a lettuce leaf, held it under the running water, and began washing it with slow, careful movements. His entire attention seemed focused on the leaf, the way the water ran over its surface, the texture of it between his fingers, the bright green color, the delicate veins. This lettuce, Thầy Hien said softly, it came from a seed. The seed needed soil, water, sunshine, the work of many hands. Now it is here, in this moment, clean and beautiful. When we eat it tonight, it will nourish our bodies so we can continue practicing. All of this, he lifted the leaf slightly, is happening right now. The lettuce doesn't exist in the future when you'll be studying. It doesn't exist in the past when you might have said something wrong this morning. It exists here. Now, he handed the clean lettuce to Min. When you wash lettuce, just wash lettuce. When you study later, just study. When you sit in meditation, just sit. Don't try to do tomorrow's tasks while doing today's tasks. You're not meant to live in 3 different times at once. Min held the lettuce leaf, really looking at it for perhaps the first time. It was beautiful, fresh, alive, present. But Thay, he said quietly, my mind doesn't want to stay here. It keeps running ahead or going back. I try to stay present, but the thoughts pull me away. Of course they do. That's what thoughts do. They're not the problem. They're not? No. The problem is that you keep following them. A thought arises, I need to study later, and instead of noticing it and returning to washing lettuce, you climb aboard that thought, like climbing onto a boat, and let it carry you away to an imaginary future. Then another thought comes. Did I make a mistake this morning? And you climb onto that boat and let it carry you to an imaginary past. Back and forth, back and forth. You're never here. Min felt something crack open in his chest. It was true. He was constantly abandoning the present moment, boarding thought boats to elsewhere. But how do I stop? How do I make the thoughts stop coming? You don't. Tai Hien picked up another lettuce leaf and began washing it. Thoughts will keep coming. That's fine. Let them come. But you don't have to board every boat. You can watch the thought boats drift by while you stay here, washing lettuce, feeling the water on your hands, seeing the green of the leaves, breathing in and breathing out. Just to stay here, just stay here. And when you notice you've climbed onto a thought boat and drifted away, which will happen many times, just step off the boat and come back. Back to your hands. Back to the water. Back to the lettuce. Back to breathing. Back to now. They worked together in silence for a while. Min tried to follow Thay Hien's instruction. He picked up a lettuce leaf, felt its weight in his palm, held it under the cool water, watched the water run off it. A thought arose. I wonder if I'm doing this right. Before, he would have followed that thought into analysis and worry. Now, he noticed it, thought about doing it right, and returned to the lettuce. The green leaf, the cool water, his breathing. Another thought. This is hard. I keep getting distracted. Notice it. Thought about difficulty. Return to the lettuce. Another thought. What will we eat with this lettuce tonight? Notice it. Thought about tonight. Return to the lettuce. It was like a game. Almost. The thoughts kept coming, throwing out hooks to catch him, and he kept noticing them and returning. Sometimes he'd realize he'd been caught for a minute or two, lost in some worry or plan, and he'd gently come back. No judgment. Just return. By the time they'd finished washing all the vegetables, Min felt different. Lighter somehow. More here. Thay, he said, as they were drying their hands. I think I understand. A little. Tai Hien smiled. Good. Now you have a lifetime to practice it. Because understanding it once while washing lettuce is easy. living it every moment. That's the practice. Over the following weeks, Min carried this teaching into every activity. When he swept the courtyard, he practiced being fully with the sweeping, the sound of the broom on stone, the gathering of leaves, the rhythm of the movement. When his mind would drift to other concerns, he would notice, thinking about later, and return to sweeping. When he sat in meditation, he would focus on his breath, the cool air entering his nostrils, the gentle rise of his chest, the warm air leaving his body. Thoughts would arise constantly, worries, plans, memories, judgments. Instead of following them or fighting them, he would notice them the way he might notice clouds passing through the sky. Worry thought, planning thought, memory, judgment, and return to breathing. When he ate, he practiced tasting his food, really tasting it, not just putting it in his mouth while thinking about other things. The texture of rice, the flavor of vegetables, the act of chewing. So simple, so immediate, so real. And slowly, gradually, something began to shift. The anxiety that had been his constant companion started to loosen its grip. Not because his circumstances changed, he still had tasks to complete, studies to master, a future to consider. But because he stopped abandoning the present moment to worry about things that weren't happening right now. When he was sweeping, he was sweeping. When he was sitting, he was sitting. When he was eating, he was eating. And in those moments of full presence, there was no anxiety. Anxiety lived in imaginary futures and reimagined pasts. It couldn't survive in the actual present. One evening, several months into this practice, Min was sitting in meditation when he noticed something remarkable. His mind had been quiet, not empty, not without thoughts, but spacious, peaceful. A thought arose. I should check if this peace will last. He noticed the thought, smiled slightly. The irony wasn't lost on him. Worrying about whether peace would last is itself the end of peace. So he noticed the thought, returned to his breathing, and stayed present. The peace remained, not because he grasped at it, but because he let it be what it was in this moment, without demanding it continue into the next. After meditation, he sought out Thay Hien. The old monk was sitting on a bench in the courtyard, looking at the stars. Thay, Ming said, sitting beside him. I think I'm beginning to understand why you move so slowly, why you smile so much. Tell me, you're always here. You're not rushing ahead to the next moment. You're fully in this moment. That's why you seem so peaceful. Thay Hien nodded. When you're fully here, there is no anxiety about being somewhere else. When you're fully in this step, there is no worry about the next step. When you're fully in this breath, there is no fear about the next breath. The present moment is the only moment we actually have. It's also the only moment we actually need. I've spent so much time running away from now. Most people do. They think peace is somewhere else in a future when things are different, or in a past when things were better. But peace is only available here, in this moment. And this moment is always available. They sat together in comfortable silence, breathing the cool night air, listening to the crickets, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Min felt his breath moving in and out. He felt the hardness of the bench beneath him. He heard the sound of wind in the bamboo. He smelled the faint scent of incense from the meditation hall. He was here, fully here. And in being fully here, He discovered something he'd been searching for during all those months of anxious thinking. He found peace. Not peace as the absence of thoughts. Not peace as a permanent state he could grasp and keep forever. But peace as this moment, fully lived. Peace as presence. Peace as the simple miracle of being aware, being alive, being here now. How much of your life have you spent not being where you are? How many meals have you eaten while thinking about something else? How many conversations have you had while your mind was planning the next thing you needed to say? How many moments have slipped past you because you were thinking about the last moment or the next moment? But not this moment. This is where so much of our anxiety lives, in this constant abandonment of now. Your body is here, lying in bed, but your mind is somewhere else entirely. Maybe it's rehearsing tomorrow's difficult conversation. Maybe it's replaying today's awkward moment. Maybe it's planning all the things you need to do, worrying about all the things that could go wrong, remembering all the things you wish had gone differently. And while your mind is busy time traveling, this moment, the only moment that's actually real, is passing unnoticed. The feeling of cool sheets against your skin, the quiet darkness, the gentle rhythm of your breathing, the simple fact of being alive, right now, in this body, in this bed, in this night, all of it missed because your attention is elsewhere. Here's what Min discovered, and what you can discover too. The present moment is the only place where peace exists. Not because the present moment is always pleasant, sometimes it isn't, but because anxiety can't survive in the actual present. Anxiety needs an imagined future to worry about, or an imagined past to regret. When you're fully here, fully now, there's nothing to be anxious about. There's just this breath, this sensation, this moment. Think about it. When you're truly absorbed in something really present with it, where is the anxiety? When you're fully focused on washing dishes, feeling the warm water on your hands, watching the soap bubbles form and pop, there's no room for worry. When you're completely present while walking, feeling each step, breathing the air, noticing what you see, the anxiety has nowhere to stand. The practice is simple, though not always easy. Keep coming back. Your mind will wander, that's what minds do. You'll start this very paragraph, fully present, and by the end of it, your mind will have drifted to tomorrow's meetings or yesterday's conversation. That's normal. That's not failure. That's just what minds do. But each time you notice you've drifted, you have a choice. You can follow the thought wherever it wants to take you. Or you can notice it, thinking about tomorrow, and gently return to now. Return to the feeling of your body resting. Return to the sensation of breathing. Return to the simple reality of this moment. You don't have to fight the thoughts. You don't have to make them stop. You just don't have to board every thought boat that drifts by. You can watch them pass, worried thought about work, planning thought about tomorrow, judgmental thought about today, and stay here, anchored in the present through the simple awareness of breathing. Let your breathing be your anchor now. Feel the cool air entering your nostrils. Feel the gentle expansion of your chest. Feel the warm air leaving your body. This is happening right now, not in memory, not in anticipation. Right now. Your worried thoughts about tomorrow, they're not happening right now. Tomorrow isn't happening right now. Right now, you're breathing in darkness. Your body is resting, and this moment is actually quite simple. No problems to solve right now. No conversations to navigate right now. No decisions to make right now. Just breathing. Just resting. Just being here. When the thought comes, but I need to think about tomorrow, notice it. You can think about tomorrow, right now. You can be here, fully here, feeling your shoulders relax, feeling your jaw soften, feeling the weight of your head on the pillow. The miracle that Min discovered while washing lettuce is available to you right now while lying in bed. When you're fully present, you're free. Free from the anxiety of imaginary futures. Free from the regret of unchangeable pasts. Free to simply be here, now, breathing, alive. This moment doesn't need to be different for you to find peace in it. You don't need to wait until your thoughts stop or your worries disappear. Peace isn't found by changing this moment. Peace is found by fully inhabiting this moment, exactly as it is. Feel your breath. Feel your body. Feel the simple fact of being here. This is enough. This moment, just as it is enough. You are enough. Here. Now. Breathing. Present. Let each breath carry you deeper into the simplicity of now, into the quiet truth that this moment is the only moment you ever need to be in. Your body knows how to rest when your mind stops rushing ahead. Feel yourself arriving, more and more fully, into the peace that has always been here, waiting. And as presence deepens and the mind settles into the rhythm of breathing, we journey now to the mountains of Korea, where a solitary monk learned that the loudest voice in the mind is often the one most worth questioning. In the mountains of southern Korea, in the winter of 1708, snow lay thick over the pine forests of Jirisan, the great mountain range that stretched along the peninsula's southern spine. High on a remote slope, accessible only by a narrow footpath that disappeared beneath snow for half the year, stood a small hermitage called Chiljangam Seven-Staff Hermitage, named for its distance from the nearest monastery. 7 walking staffs down the mountain. In this hermitage lived a monk named Wulmyong. He was 34 years old and had been living alone in this tiny structure for 3 years, seeing almost no one except during the summer months when occasional wandering monks would make the difficult climb to visit him. The hermitage consisted of a single room, barely large enough for Wulmyong to lie down in. There was a small wood stove, a meditation cushion, a sleeping mat, shelves for a few texts, and a tiny altar with a simple Buddha statue carved from pine. Outside, a vegetable garden lay frozen beneath the snow. A spring provided water year-round. Everything Wulmyong needed to survive, and nothing more. He had come to this mountain after 10 years of wandering from monastery to monastery throughout Korea, practicing intensely, studying with various masters, following the rigorous schedule of the meditation halls, the 3-month winter retreat, 3-month summer retreat, constant sitting, walking meditation, work, practice, minimal sleep. He had passed through the Jogye order's strict training, had received transmission from his teacher, had been acknowledged as a competent practitioner, and yet something had remained unresolved. A persistent anxiety that followed him like a shadow. A worried mind that wouldn't quiet. No matter how many hours he sat, no matter how many retreats he completed, the worry had no clear source. It wasn't about anything specific. Sometimes it would attach itself to practical concerns. Would there be enough food for winter? Was he practicing correctly? Had he offended his teacher somehow? Other times it was more formless, a general unease, a sense that something was wrong or about to go wrong, a tension in his chest that never fully released. His last teacher, an elderly monk at Songwangsa Temple, had given him the hwadu that he'd been working with ever since. What is this? Not, what is this table, or what is this teaching, but simply, what is this? Turned inward. A question about the very nature of experiencing itself. What is this moment? What is this awareness? What is this that asks, what is this? His teacher had told him, great questioning, great awakening. Small questioning, small awakening. No questioning, no awakening. Take this wadu into the mountains. Sit with it until the question becomes your entire life. Don't look for an answer. Let the questioning itself dissolve the one who is asking. So Wulmyong had climbed to Chiljangam, 3 years now, asking the question, returning to it thousands upon thousands of times. And still, beneath the questioning, the worried mind persisted. On this particular winter morning, Wulmyong woke before dawn as usual. The hermitage was bitterly cold. His breath formed clouds in the darkness. He could hear wind moving through the pine trees outside, a low, constant rushing sound punctuated by sharper gusts that rattled the paper window screens. He rose, added wood to the stove, waited for warmth to seep into the room. Then he sat on his cushion facing the wall and began his practice. What is this? The question arose in his mind, not as words exactly, but as a living inquiry, an opening, a not knowing. What is this? Immediately, another voice appeared. The worried mind, you're not doing it right. The questioning isn't strong enough. You've been here 3 years and nothing has changed. You're wasting your time. Other monks have broken through by now. What's wrong with you? Before, Wulmyong would have tried to push these thoughts away, to return to the Huadu by force. Or he would have followed the worried thoughts into deeper worry, analyzing them, trying to solve them. But this morning, something different happened. He asked the Huadu not about the hermitage, not about the cold, not about his practice, but about the worried mind itself. What is this? The worried voice speaking in his head. What was it? Where did it come from? Who was worrying? What is this? He sat with the question, not expecting an answer, but allowing the inquiry to be present with the worry itself. The anxiety about not practicing correctly, what was that? Not the content of the worry, but the worry itself. What was its substance? What was it made of? What is this? An hour passed. 2 hours. The hermitage grew warmer. Light began seeping through the paper windows, grey and diffuse, filtered through snow clouds. The worried mind kept producing thoughts. This is foolish. You're just avoiding real practice now. You're supposed to question existence itself, not your worried thoughts. You're getting distracted. But Wulmyong kept turning the Huadu toward the warrior itself. What is this? Who is calling this practice foolish? What is the nature of this voice that claims to know what real practice is? What is this? The question began to create a strange kind of space. He noticed that the worried voice would arise, criticizing, analyzing, predicting problems, and then it would pass. Another worried thought would arise and pass. Then another. They were like weather moving through. Like clouds he'd watched from this hermitage window, forming and dissolving against the mountain peaks. But what was watching them? What was this awareness that could notice worried thoughts arising and passing? What is this? The more he questioned, the more peculiar it became. The worried mind would say, "You need to figure out if you're enlightened or not. How will you know? What if you've been enlightened all along and didn't recognize it? What if you never become enlightened?" And Wulmyong would ask, "What is this that wants to know if it's enlightened?" The worried mind would say, "You should eat something, but not too much. You need energy for practice, but if you eat too much, you'll get sleepy. Better to eat after sitting, but then you'll be hungry during sitting. This is impossible to get right." And Wulmyong would ask, What is this that believes there's a right way? The worried mind would say. Your teacher said to question until the questioner dissolves. But you're still here. The questioner hasn't dissolved. You're failing. And Wolmyong would ask, what is this that knows it hasn't dissolved? Something began to loosen. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, like ice thawing when spring finally comes to the mountain. The worried thoughts kept arising that didn't change, but they began to feel less solid, less authoritative, less like truth and more like what? Sound, movement, energy passing through awareness. By midday, Wolmyong stood up, stretched his stiff legs, and prepared a simple meal of rice and preserved vegetables. As he ate, the worried mind offered its commentary. You're eating too fast. You should be more mindful. This pickle doesn't taste right. Maybe it's gone bad. You could get sick out here alone. He noticed the thoughts, noticed how they wanted him to believe them, to take them seriously, to respond to them. And beneath that noticing, the question persisted. What is this? What was this worried mind that had been his constant companion for so many years? Was it him? Was he the worrier? Or was the worrier a habit? A pattern? A voice that had developed over time and now ran automatically? Like water following a groove worn in stone? After eating, he went outside to fetch more wood. The snow was deep, the sky heavy and grey. It would snow again soon. The worried mind immediately began. There might not be enough wood. You should have prepared more in autumn. What if you run out? You could freeze. What is this? He carried an armload of wood back to the hermitage. His body knew how to carry wood. His legs knew how to walk through snow. His hands knew how to stack logs by the door. All of this happened without the worried mind's help. In fact, the worried mind wasn't actually doing anything except creating a running commentary about what might go wrong. That evening, as darkness fell and wind howled around the hermitage, Wolmyong sat again. Hours passed. The oil lamp burned low. Outside, he heard the first heavy flakes of new snow beginning to fall. Soft thuds on the roof. The worried mind, as always, was present. You're alone on a mountain in a snowstorm. This is dangerous. What if the hermitage collapses? What if you get trapped? What if no one finds you until spring? But now, something in him was no longer fully believing these thoughts. They were there, he could hear them clearly, but they didn't have the same grip. It was as if he'd discovered he could watch the worried mind from a different vantage point, a place that wasn't caught in the worry. What is this? The question wasn't creating an answer. It was creating space, space between the worried thought and the belief in the worried thought, space between the voice of anxiety and the sense that the voice had to be obeyed. Suddenly, in that space, laughter rose up in Wolmyong's chest. Not intellectual amusement, but genuine surprise and delight. For 3 years, he'd been sitting here, trying to find peace from his worried mind. And all along, he'd been treating the worried mind as if it were him, as if its concerns were his concerns, as if solving its problems would bring him freedom. But the worried mind didn't need to be solved. It just needed to be seen for what it was, a pattern of thinking, a habit of consciousness, arising and passing like everything else. Temporary, insubstantial, not the truth of who he was, but simply weather moving through awareness. He didn't need to get rid of the worried mind. He needed to stop identifying with it. Stop giving it authority. Stop believing it when it claimed to know what was wrong and what needed fixing. What is this? The question itself had become the answer, not as words, not as a concept, but as a living realization. What was the worried mind? It was just this, a movement of thought, a voice without substance, arising and dissolving in the vast space of awareness. And what was he? Not the worried thoughts, not the worried voice, but the awareness itself. The space in which worry could arise without being the whole truth. The silence that held all sound. The stillness that wasn't disturbed by movement. The snow fell harder now, accumulating on the roof. Inside the hermitage, warmth from the stove created a small sphere of comfort in the vast cold darkness of the mountain night. Wulmyong sat, breathing quietly. The Huadu still present, but lighter now. Not a tool to achieve something, but simply a reminder of what had always been true. What is this? Just this. Awareness, aware of itself. Space holding everything, worry and peace. Sound and silence. Snow and warmth. Question and questioning. The worried mind would surely return tomorrow with new concerns. That was fine. Let it come. He no longer needed it to be different. He no longer needed to be free from it. Because he discovered something the worried mind could never take away. The vast awareness that was his true nature, untouched by any worry that passed through it. The question had led him not to an answer, but to a deeper question. Not what is wrong, but what is this? And in that shift from trying to fix what was wrong to simply being present with what was, everything changed without anything changing at all. How much power have you given to your worried mind? How many years have you listened to it as if it were speaking truth? As if its concerns were your concerns? As if you and the worried voice were the same thing? This is perhaps the most liberating discovery available to anyone who struggles with anxiety. You are not your worried mind. The worried thoughts that run through your consciousness. What if this goes wrong? You should have done that better. Something bad is coming. These are not you. They're movements of thought, patterns of mental energy, habits that have developed over time. But they are not the truth of who you are. Think about what happens when you lie awake at 3 in the morning and the worried mind is speaking. It sounds so convincing, doesn't it? So authoritative. It presents its concerns as if they're obvious facts. You're not doing enough. You're going to fail. Something is wrong. And because the voice arises in your own head, you assume it must be you, must be true, must be worthy of your total belief and attention. But what if you asked a different question? Not how do I solve these worries, but what is this worried mind? Where does it come from? Who is worried? When you ask this sincerely, something remarkable happens. You begin to notice that there's the worried thought, and then there's the awareness that notices the worried thought. These are not the same thing. The worried thought comes and goes. It arises, exists for a moment, and dissolves. But the awareness that notices it, that's constant, spacious, unchanged by whatever passes through it. You are not the worried mind. You are the awareness in which the worried mind appears and disappears. Just as the sky is not the clouds that pass through it, you are not the anxious thoughts that move through your consciousness. This doesn't mean the worried thoughts will stop. They probably won't. The worried mind is a deeply ingrained pattern, developed over years, maybe decades. It's trying to protect you by anticipating problems, analyzing threats, preparing for worst-case scenarios. It thinks it's helping, but you don't have to believe everything it says. You don't have to treat its predictions as facts. You don't have to let it run your life. Right now, lying here, you can practice what Wulmyong discovered. When a worried thought arises, and one probably will in the next few moments, instead of following it or fighting it, just notice it. Ah, there's a worried thought. And then ask, gently, what is this? What is this worry made of? Who is worried? Don't look for an intellectual answer. Just allow the question to create a little space between you and the worried thought. Allow yourself to notice that there's thinking happening, and there's an awareness that knows thinking is happening. You are the awareness, not the thinking. The worried mind might say, "This won't work. You've tried everything. Why would this be different?" Notice that thought. It's just the worried mind doing what it does, worrying about whether you'll stop worrying. The irony is perfect. Don't fight it. Just see it. Ah, there it is again. Worrying about worry. Feel your breath moving in your chest. That's happening right now, independent of any worried thought. Your heart is beating. Blood is flowing. Your body is resting in darkness. All of this is happening without the worried mind's supervision or permission. The worried mind is not in charge of your life. It never has been. It's just a voice, a pattern, a beat. You've given it authority by believing it, by treating its concerns as commands, by assuming that peace would come only when the worried mind finally quieted down. But peace doesn't require the worried mind to quiet. Peace comes from recognizing that you are not the worried mind. Peace is the awareness that can hold worry without being defined by it, without being disturbed by it, without needing it to be different. Let your shoulders release. Let your jaw soften. The worried thoughts can keep arising, that's fine. They're just weather, just movement, just energy passing through the vast space of awareness that you are. You don't have to figure out if you're doing this right. You don't have to know if you're enlightened or unenlightened. You don't have to solve whether you'll sleep tonight or worry tomorrow. All of these are just more worried thoughts. Let them pass like clouds. What remains when worried thoughts come and go? What is here before they arrive and after they depart? What is this awareness that has been present your whole life, watching everything unfold, never disturbed at its core by anything that passes through? That awareness, spacious, all silent, unchanging, that's your true nature. Not the worried mind, not the voice of anxiety. The vast open awareness in which all experience arises and dissolves. Rest as that awareness now. Let worried thoughts drift through if they wish. They can't hurt the sky. They can't diminish the space. They can only move through, temporary as everything else, while you remain aware, spacious, at peace in your deepest nature. Feel yourself settling deeper into that spaciousness, into the quiet recognition that you are the awareness, not the worry. Your breath flows naturally, requiring nothing from the worried mind. Your body releases into rest as you discover the freedom of simply being, watching thoughts arise and dissolve without needing to follow them anywhere. And as this recognition deepens, as the grip of worried thinking loosens its hold, we travel now to the high plateau of Tibet, where a young nun discovered that the mind she'd been trying to control had never needed controlling at all. On the high plateau of Tibet in the year 1872, at an altitude where the air was thin and every breath felt precious, there stood a small nunnery called Dorje Ling Thunderbolt Place. It clung to a mountainside above a valley where yaks grazed on sparse grass and barley fields terraced the slopes in narrow green ribbons. The nunnery housed 23 nuns, ranging from teenagers to elderly women who had spent 40 years or more in practice. They lived in simple stone rooms, wore maroon robes, shaved their heads, and followed a daily rhythm of meditation, prayer, study, and work that had remained largely unchanged for centuries. Among them was a nun named Pema. She was 28 years old and had been ordained for 6 years. Before coming to Darjeeling, she had lived in a village 2 valleys away, the eldest daughter of a family of farmers. Her childhood had been unremarkable, tending animals, helping with harvest, learning to weave and cook. But from an early age, she'd been troubled by a restless, anxious mind that gave her no peace. Even as a child, Pema's mind had raced constantly. While other children played, she worried about whether she'd said the wrong thing, whether her parents were disappointed in her, whether she'd done her chores correctly. As she grew older, the worries multiplied. Marriage loomed as an expectation she dreaded, not because she disliked the young man her family had chosen, but because the thought of managing a household, bearing children, being responsible for others' well-being, filled her with overwhelming anxiety. When a wandering nun visited her village and spoke about the possibility of monastic life, something in Pema recognized a refuge. She approached her parents hesitatingly, expecting resistance. But to her surprise, they agreed. Her mother, who had watched her daughter's anxious nature for years, said simply, "Perhaps this path will bring you peace." So at 22, Pema had climbed the steep path to Darjeeling, offered herself to the abbess, and taken her vows. She'd expected that monastic life with its structure, its discipline, its focus on spiritual practice would quiet her worried mind. Instead, she discovered that the worried mind simply found new things to worry about. Now, 6 years later, Pema sat in the meditation hall before dawn, as she did every morning, trying desperately to control her mind. This was the practice as she understood it. Sit perfectly still, hold the mind perfectly steady, watch the breath moving in and out, and when thoughts arose, which they did, constantly push them away and return to the breath. She'd been doing this for 6 years, and her mind seemed more uncontrollable than ever. This particular morning, the worried thoughts were especially persistent. She'd been assigned to help prepare the weekly ritual feast, a complex series of offerings that required precise arrangement of tormas, ritual cakes, careful recitation of prayers, and coordination with several other nuns. Pema was terrified she would make a mistake, forget a crucial step, arrange something incorrectly, dishonor the practice through her incompetence. As she sat, the thoughts circled endlessly. I need to remember the sequence. Water offerings first, then incense, then... Or is it incense first? I should have paid more attention last time. What if I forget? What if everyone sees me making mistakes? They'll think I'm a terrible practitioner. Maybe I am a terrible practitioner. I can't even control my mind during meditation. After 6 years, I should be better at this. What's wrong with me? Pema noticed the thoughts, just as she'd been taught. She tried to push them away and return to her breath, but they came right back, sometimes within seconds. Push them away again. Return to the breath. Here they come again. Push harder. Try to force the mind to be still. It was exhausting. After the morning meditation session, as the nuns filed out of the hall into the pale dawn light, Pema's teacher, an elderly nun named Ani Yeshe, gestured for her to stay behind. Ani Yeshe was in her 70s, had been a nun since childhood, and had the weathered, gentle presence of someone who had spent decades sitting with her own mind. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes bright and clear, her movements slow but deliberate. "Pema," she said quietly, settling onto a cushion and gesturing for Pema to sit across from her. "I've been watching you sit. You're fighting a war in there, aren't you?" Pema felt tears spring to her eyes. "I can't control it. Anila, My mind won't be still. No matter how hard I try, the thoughts keep coming. I push them away and they come right back. I'm failing at the most basic practice. Aniyeshe smiled, not unkindly. And why are you trying to control your mind? Because that's the practice, isn't it? Meditation is training the mind, calming it, making it still and peaceful. Aniyeshe reached for a small bowl of water that sat on the altar nearby. She held it up so Pema could see. The water was perfectly clear, perfectly still. Is this what you think your mind should be like? Pema nodded. Aniyeshe set the bowl down and then, suddenly, smacked her hand on the floor beside it. The water sloshed and rippled, disturbed by the vibration. And when thoughts arise, this is what happens. Yes, the still water becomes agitated. So you try to make it still again. You try to stop the ripples. But the trying itself creates more ripples. Yes, Pema stared at the bowl, watching the water gradually settle. Yes, exactly that. So you sit there, Aniyeshe continued, trying to force the water to be still, trying to control the ripples. And the more you try, the more effort you make, the more disturbed the water becomes. You're creating the very agitation you're trying to stop. But what else can I do? If I don't try to control the thoughts, they'll just run wild. The mind will be completely chaotic. Aniyeshe picked up the bowl again, held it steady, and simply watched it. The ripples continued for a few more moments, then gradually faded. The water became still on its own, without any effort to make it so. The water's nature is to be clear and still, she said softly. When disturbed, it naturally returns to stillness if you simply let it be. You don't have to make it still. You just have to stop disturbing it. But I'm not disturbing it. The thoughts are disturbing it. No. Aniyeshe set the bowl down. The thoughts arise naturally, like ripples from wind touching water. That's not the disturbance. The disturbance comes from your response to the thoughts, from fighting them, judging them, trying to push them away. Every time you fight a thought, you create more movement, more ripples. Pema felt something shift in her understanding, but couldn't quite grasp it. So I should just let the thoughts happen? Not exactly. Let me show you something. Aniyeshe stood up, moved to the window, and gestured for Pema to join her. Outside, the sky was brightening, pale blue emerging from darkness. As they watched, a cloud drifted into view, small and white against the vastness of sky. Is the sky disturbed by the cloud? Aniyeshe asked. No. Does the sky try to push the cloud away? No. Does the sky worry that the cloud shouldn't be there? No. And yet, the cloud passes through the sky without leaving a trace. The sky remains vast, open, unchanged. This is the nature of mind, not the thoughts, but the awareness in which thoughts arise, spacious like the sky. The thoughts are like clouds. They come and go. They don't disturb the essential nature of awareness unless you grasp at them or push them away. They return to their cushions. Pema felt both confused and oddly hopeful. But how do I practice this? What do I actually do differently? Stop trying to control the mind. Instead, rest in the awareness that notices the mind. There's the thought, and there's the knowing that a thought has arisen. These are not the same. You've been identifying with the thoughts, fighting with the thoughts, trying to manage the thoughts. But you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that knows thinking is happening. Ani-Yeshe closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Right now, in this moment, I'm experiencing thoughts. A thought about teaching, a thought about breakfast, a thought about the weather. These thoughts arise, exist briefly, and dissolve. I don't try to stop them. I don't judge them. I simply rest in the awareness that notices them arising and passing. The awareness itself is never disturbed. It's like the sky, always spacious, always clear at its essence, even when clouds pass through. But what about the worried thoughts, the anxious ones that feel so urgent? Same thing. An anxious thought is still just a thought. It arises in awareness, exists for a moment, and dissolves unless you grab onto it, believe it completely, and let it carry you away into more worried thinking. Then you're not aware of the thought anymore. You've become lost in it. You've forgotten that you are the sky, and you've identified completely with the cloud. Pema sat quietly, feeling her breath move in and out. Almost immediately, a thought arose. I'm worried about the feast preparation today. In the past, she would have tried to push the thought away, force her attention back to her breath, judge herself for getting distracted. Now, following Ani-Yeshe's instruction, she tried something different. She noticed the thought. Worried, thought about feast. And instead of fighting it or following it into more worry, she stayed with the awareness that was noticing. The awareness was spacious. The worried thought was small. The thought arose, floated there for a moment like a cloud, and then, because she neither grasped it nor pushed it away, it began to dissolve on its own. Another thought arose. But what if I mess this up too? What if I'm doing it wrong? Notice. Thought about doing it wrong. The awareness remained spacious. The thought dissolved. Anila, Pema whispered, opening her eyes. Is it really this simple? Ani-Yeshe smiled. Simple to understand. Not always easy to remember. You've spent years, maybe your whole life, identifying with thoughts, believing that you are the thinker, that the worried thoughts are you. It takes practice to recognize the difference between the thoughts and the awareness. But yes, at its essence, it's this simple. Stop trying to control the mind. Instead, rest in the nature of mind, which is already spacious, already at peace, already free. Over the following days, Pema practiced this new way. It felt strange at first, almost like giving up, like not really meditating. She'd been trying so hard for so long that not trying felt wrong somehow. But gradually, she began to notice the difference. When she sat in meditation and simply rested in awareness, noticing thoughts arise and dissolve, without fighting them, there was spaciousness, peace. Not because the thoughts stopped, but because she stopped identifying with them, stopped believing she had to control them. The worried thoughts about the feast still arose. What if I forget the sequence? What if I make a mistake? But now, she recognized them as weather passing through the sky of awareness. Ah, worried thought. And she would return to simply being aware, spacious, present. On the day of the feast preparation, Pema discovered something remarkable. As she worked alongside the other nuns, arranging offerings and reciting prayers, the worried thoughts arose as usual. But because she wasn't fighting them, wasn't lost in them, wasn't using all her energy trying to control her mind, she was actually more present with what she was doing. Her hands knew how to arrange the tormas. Her voice knew how to recite the prayers. The worried thoughts floated through awareness without obscuring the clarity of the moment. She made a mistake, placed one offering slightly out of sequence. One of the older nuns gently corrected her, and Pema noticed that there was embarrassment, a flash of anxious thought. See, you're incompetent. But the thought arose in awareness and dissolved. It wasn't the truth of who she was. It was just weather. Just a cloud passing through an open sky. That evening, after the feast, Pema sought out Aniyeshe again. The old nun was sitting outside her room, looking out at the valley below where lights were beginning to appear in the distant village. "Anila," Pema said, settling beside her. "I think I'm beginning to understand. The mind I was trying to control it was never something separate that needed to be tamed. It's just thoughts arising in awareness, and the awareness itself was never disturbed." Aniyeshi nodded. "Yes, the nature of mind is like the nature of water, clear and still. The nature of awareness is like the nature of sky, vast and open. Thoughts arise naturally, like ripples on water or clouds in sky. This is not a problem to solve. It's just what minds do. The suffering comes from fighting with this natural process, from believing you are the thoughts instead of the awareness, from trying to make the mind into something other than what it naturally is. So all these years, I've been suffering not because my mind was uncontrollable, but because I was trying to control it, more or less. The worried thoughts arose because that's what your mind was conditioned to produce, probably from childhood, probably from fear and uncertainty. That's not your fault. But the suffering, the exhaustion, the feeling of failure, the constant battle that came from resisting what was happening, from fighting with your own mind, from believing that peace could only come if the worried thoughts stopped. But they haven't stopped," Pema said. "No, and they may never fully stop. That's okay. You don't need them to stop. You need to recognize that you are not the worried thoughts. You are the awareness in which they arise and pass away. That awareness is always peaceful, always spacious, always free whether worried thoughts are present or not." They sat together in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the valley. Above them, stars began to appear in the vast Tibetan sky. Pema felt her breath moving naturally, effortlessly. Thoughts arose and dissolved. Some were worried thoughts. Some were peaceful thoughts. Some were just random fragments. All of them floated through awareness like clouds through sky, leaving no trace. She no longer needed to control them. She only needed to remember what she truly was, not the clouds, but the vast open sky in which everything arises and passes away. How much effort have you spent trying to control your mind? How many techniques have you tried? How many battles have you fought? How many times have you felt like a failure because the worried thoughts kept coming back, no matter how hard you tried to stop them? Here's what Pema discovered, and what you can discover right now. You don't need to control your mind. The very effort to control it creates more tension, more disturbance, more suffering. You're trying to make water be still by constantly stirring it. You're trying to make the sky be clear by fighting with clouds. The nature of mind, the awareness itself, is already peaceful, already spacious, already free. It doesn't become peaceful when you finally manage to stop all your thoughts. It's peaceful now, underneath all the thoughts, holding them all without being disturbed by any of them. Think about the sky. Right now, above, wherever you are, there's sky. Maybe there are clouds in that sky, thick clouds, storm clouds, beautiful clouds, threatening clouds. But underneath all the clouds, the sky remains unchanged, vast, open, clear in its essential nature. The clouds don't damage the sky. They can't make the sky less spacious. They just pass through. Your awareness is like that sky. The worried thoughts, the anxious thoughts, the planning thoughts, the regretful thoughts, all of them are like clouds. They arise. They exist for a while. They dissolve. They pass through awareness without changing its fundamental nature. But you've been taught by culture, by conditioning, maybe even by well-meaning meditation instructions that you need to control these thoughts. That a good mind is a controlled mind. That peace comes from making all the clouds disappear. So you sit there, mentally exhausted, trying to force the clouds away. And the more effort you make, the more disturbed everything becomes. What if you stopped trying, not stopped caring, not given up on peace, but stopped fighting with your own mind? Right now, lying here in darkness, you can practice what Ani Yeshe taught Pema. A thought arises. Maybe it's a worried thought about tomorrow. Maybe it's a judgment about whether you're doing this right. Maybe it's just some random memory. Instead of pushing it away, just notice it. Thought. Don't judge it. Don't analyze it. Don't try to make it go away. Just recognize. Thought arising in awareness. And then notice the awareness itself, the spaciousness that knows a thought has appeared. Rest in that awareness. It's vast. The thought is small. The thought will dissolve on its own if you neither grasp it nor fight it. Another thought arises. Thought. Notice it. Notice the awareness. Rest in spaciousness. The thought dissolves. This is not control. This is recognition. You're recognizing the difference between the clouds and the sky. You're recognizing that you are not your worried thoughts. You are the awareness in which worried thoughts arise and pass away. Feel your breathing. No thought is doing the breathing. The body breathes naturally, effortlessly, without mental effort or worry. Your heart beats. Your cells regenerate. All of this happens in the vast awareness that you are, independent of whether worried thoughts are present or not. The worried mind will probably generate more thoughts right now. This won't work. I've tried everything. My mind is different. My anxiety is too strong. Notice those thoughts. They're just more clouds. More weather patterns the mind has learned to produce. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to fight them. Just let them arise in awareness and dissolve back into awareness. Let your shoulders release. Let your jaw unclench. You don't have to control your mind. You never did. All you need to do is remember that you are not the worried thoughts. You are the awareness. Spacious as sky. Peaceful in your essential nature. Undisturbed by any cloud that passes through. Rest in that awareness now. Let thoughts come and go as they will. They can't hurt the sky. They can't diminish spaciousness. They're just temporary movements in the vast stillness of awareness. And that awareness clear, open, at peace. That's what you truly are. Let your breathing carry you deeper into that recognition. Deeper into the spaciousness that has been here all along, patiently waiting beneath every worried thought. Your body softens as you stop fighting, as you remember that the peace you seek isn't something to achieve, but something to recognize already present, already whole, already free. And as this spaciousness opens, as the grip of control finally releases, we travel now to ancient China, where a young scholar discovered that the freedom he sought through endless study was actually found by letting every book close. In the Tang dynasty, during the middle of the 8th century, in the city of Chang'an, the capital of the empire, the largest city in the world, a place of monasteries and marketplaces and endless scholarship, there lived a young man named Deng. He was 26 years old, et brilliant, and deeply miserable. Deng had been raised in a family of scholars. His father was an official in the imperial court. His grandfather had been a noted Confucian philosopher, and the expectation from birth was that Deng would follow in their footsteps, mastering the classics, passing the examinations, entering government service, bringing honor to his family name. He had done all of this. By 23, he had passed the highest level of the imperial examinations with distinction. He knew the 5 classics by heart, could recite thousands of lines of poetry, had studied history, philosophy, law, mathematics, music, archery, and ritual. His mind was a repository of knowledge, sharp as a blade, quick as lightning. And yet, something gnawed at him constantly, a worry that never quieted, an anxiety that followed him through every achievement. The more he learned, the more he realized how much more there was to know. The more he mastered, the more aware he became of what he hadn't yet mastered. His mind raced, constantly analyzing, comparing, judging, planning, worrying that he wasn't enough, that he would be exposed as insufficient, that all his knowledge was somehow hollow. One autumn evening, after a particularly exhausting day of studying Buddhist sutras, Deng had recently become fascinated by the growing influence of Buddhism in the capital. He found himself wandering the streets near the Western Market. His head ached from hours of concentrated reading. His eyes burned. His mind felt like a tangled net. Thoughts catching on thoughts. Worries breeding more worries. He passed a small Chan temple he'd never noticed before, tucked between larger buildings. The gate was open. On impulse, he entered. Inside, the courtyard was simple. A few trees, a stone well, the sound of wind chimes, and sitting on a bench under a ginkgo tree, an old monk in worn robes, drinking tea. The monk looked up as Deng approached, smiled, and gestured to the bench beside him. "Sit, if you like. The tea is still hot." Deng sat. He didn't know why. Normally he would have bowed politely and moved on. He had studying to do, texts to finish, knowledge to acquire. But something about the monk's presence, the simple quietness of the courtyard, made him stay. The monk poured tea into a second cup and handed it to Deng. They sat in silence for a while, drinking. Finally, the monk spoke. "You look like someone carrying a great weight." Deng laughed bitterly. "How can you tell? Your shoulders, your jaw, your eyes, even the way you hold that teacup like you're bracing for something to go wrong." The monk took another sip. "What is it you carry? Knowledge, I suppose." Deng set down his cup. "I'm a scholar. I study constantly. Buddhist texts, Confucian classics, Taoist philosophy, everything. But the more I learn, the more worried I become that I haven't learned enough, that I'm missing something crucial, that I'll be tested and found wanting." You're trying to fill the vessel." "The vessel?" The monk pointed to Deng's teacup. "Your mind is like this cup. You keep pouring knowledge into it, thinking that if you just fill it enough, you'll finally have peace. But a cup that's completely full cannot receive anything new. And you can never fill it enough to quiet the worry, can you? Because there's always more to pour in. More texts, More commentaries. More interpretations. The cup is bottomless. Dang stared at the tea in his cup. It was true. He'd been studying for years, and the anxiety had only grown worse, not better. So what do you suggest? Stop learning? That seems impossible. Not stop learning, but perhaps stop accumulating. Stop trying to fill the cup. The monk leaned back against the bench. In Chan, we have a saying, not knowing is most intimate. The beginner's mind, empty of preconceptions, sees clearly. The expert's mind, full of knowledge, often sees only what it already knows. But I need knowledge. How else can I understand anything? The monk smiled. You're understanding right now, aren't you? This moment. The tea. The wind. My voice. You don't need to consult a sutra to know you're sitting here. You don't need to reference a commentary to experience this evening air. The understanding that matters most is direct, immediate, not mediated by accumulated knowledge. Dung felt something resist in him. His whole identity was built on knowledge, on scholarship, on being the one who knew things. But what about wisdom? Isn't Buddhist wisdom about learning the Dharma, understanding emptiness, studying the teachings? Tell me, the monk said, how many texts have you read about emptiness? Many. The Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, Nagarjuna's commentaries, Madhyamaka philosophy. I've studied the concept extensively. And do you experience emptiness? Dung paused. I understand the concept. All things are empty of inherent existence. All phenomena arise dependently. There is no permanent self. Yes, you know the words, but do you experience it right now? In this moment, do you directly perceive the empty nature of things, or do you perceive concepts about emptiness? Deng felt his face grow warm. The truth was, he perceived thoughts about emptiness, intellectual frameworks, philosophical positions, but not the thing itself. Come back tomorrow evening, the monk said, if you wish. We sit together, no studying required. And so began a strange period in Deng's life. Every evening, he returned to the small temple. He would arrive with his mind full of the day's studying passages from texts, arguments from commentaries, questions he wanted to ask the monk about Chan philosophy. But the monk, whose name was Master Qingshan, never engaged with these questions directly. Instead, they would sit, sometimes in silence, sometimes drinking tea, sometimes just watching the light change in the courtyard, and Dong would feel his elaborate thoughts slowly dissolving, like morning mist burned away by sunlight. One evening, about a month into these visits, Deng arrived particularly agitated. He'd been studying the Platform Sutra, trying to understand Huineng's teaching about no thought, Wunian, and had become tangled in contradictions. If we're supposed to have no thought, how do we function? How do we study? How do we understand anything? He explained all this to Master Qingshan in a rush of worried analysis. The master listened patiently. Then he stood up, walked to the small pond at the edge of the courtyard, and gestured for Dung to follow. The pond was still. The surface reflected the evening sky, perfectly clouds, the first stars, the darkening blue. Look at the reflection, Master Qingshan said. Deng looked, the sky in the water. Then the master picked up a small stone and dropped it into the pond. Ripples spread out. The reflection shattered into fragments, distorted, unrecognizable. "This," the master said, pointing at the disturbed water, "is your mind right now. Agitated by thoughts about no thought. Worried about whether you're understanding correctly. Analyzing, comparing, judging. The ripples prevent you from seeing clearly." They watched as the water gradually settled. Slowly, the reflection returned. Sky in Vata. Clear, undistorted. "And this," the master said, "is also your mind." When the ripples of thought about thought settle, not because you've eliminated thinking, but because you've stopped stirring up more ripples by worrying about the thinking. But how do I stop stirring up ripples? You don't. You just stop adding more stones. Thoughts arise naturally. That's like wind touching water, creating small natural movement. But then the mind adds more thoughts about those thoughts. This thought shouldn't be here. I need to understand this thought. What does this thought mean about me? Am I thinking correctly? Each of these is another stone thrown into the pond, creating more disturbance. Deng stared at the now still water. "So, I should just let thoughts be? Let thoughts be what they are. Movements in awareness, like ripples on water. They arise. They exist briefly. They dissolve. The water itself, the awareness, remains clear in its essential nature." Over the following weeks, Deng began to notice something. When he sat quietly in the courtyard, not trying to figure anything out, not trying to fill the cup with more knowledge, there was a spaciousness in his mind he'd never noticed before. It had been there all along, underneath the constant churning of scholarship and worry, but he'd been too busy accumulating knowledge to notice it. It was like discovering that beneath all the furniture crowding a room, there was actually a vast space. The furniture, all his knowledge, all his concepts, all his worried thoughts hadn't been creating the space. It had been obscuring it. One evening, as they sat in the now familiar silence, Deng said quietly, "Master, I think I've been trying to find freedom through knowing more, through being the one who has all the answers, who has studied everything, who can explain and analyze and understand. But the more I accumulated, the more trapped I felt. Yes, this is the scholar's disease. The mind becomes a warehouse full of concepts, and you become the anxious warehouse keeper, constantly checking inventory, worrying about what's missing, trying to organize everything perfectly." Master Qingshan poured more tea. But freedom isn't found by filling the warehouse. It's found by recognizing the space in which the warehouse exists. The space, awareness itself, the knowing that isn't dependent on accumulated knowledge. Right now, you're aware. You don't need to consult a text to know you're aware. You don't need to study a commentary on awareness to be aware. This direct, immediate knowing, this is closer to wisdom than all the Buddhist philosophy you've memorized. Deng felt tears unexpectedly spring to his eyes. It was true. He'd been so busy trying to understand awareness through texts about awareness, trying to grasp emptiness through concepts about emptiness, trying to achieve wisdom through accumulated knowledge about wisdom. He'd been trying to think his way to no thought. "Can I tell you something?" Master Qingshan said. "All those texts you've studied, the Heart Sutra, the Platform Sutra, the commentaries, they're beautiful, profound, worth reading, but they're pointing at something. They're not the thing itself. It's like studying maps of the moon instead of looking up at the moon. The map can be useful, but eventually you have to close the map and just look. So all my studying has been useless? Not useless, but also not the point. The point is direct experience. The studying can support that, can point you in the right direction. But if you mistake the map for the moon, if you mistake concepts about emptiness for the experience of emptiness, you're still trapped in the warehouse of knowledge. That night, walking home through the streets of Chang'an, Deng noticed something different. The usual churning of his mind, the analysis, the worry, the constant mental commentary on everything had quieted. Not because he'd forced it to quiet, but because he'd stopped believing it was necessary. Thoughts still arose. He noticed the lanterns in windows. He heard voices from a tavern. He thought about what text he would study tomorrow. But the thoughts arose in space, in awareness, and he was no longer identifying with them, no longer believing that he was the thoughts, that his worth depended on how much he knew or how brilliantly he could analyze. He was the space in which all of it happened, the awareness that held everything, knowledge and ignorance, understanding and confusion, brilliant thoughts and stupid thoughts with equal openness. Over the following months, something shifted in Deng's relationship to scholarship. He continued to study. It was what he loved, what he was good at. But he stopped trying to fill an unfillable vessel. He stopped reading with the anxious energy of someone trying to finally know enough. Instead, he read with curiosity, with enjoyment, with an understanding that knowledge was something to play with, not something to grasp desperately. And the worried mind, which had been his constant companion for so many years, began to loosen its grip. Not because he'd found the answer to all his worries in some text, but because he'd discovered something underneath all the worrying, vast, open awareness that didn't need to know everything to be at peace. One evening, almost a year after their first meeting, Deng sat with Master Qing Shan in the familiar courtyard. The ginkgo tree had turned golden. Leaves drifted down in the autumn breeze. "Master," Deng said, "I used to think freedom came from knowing everything. Now I think it comes from being comfortable with not knowing." "Not quite," Master Qing Shan said with a smile. "Freedom comes from recognizing that the one who is aware of both knowing and not knowing is already free. The awareness itself doesn't need to know or not know anything to be what it is. It's just aware, spacious, open, always present, whether your mind is full of knowledge or empty of knowledge." Deng nodded. A golden leaf landed in his tea. He watched it float there, perfectly visible against the dark liquid. He didn't need to analyze it, interpret it, or understand what it meant. It was just this: a leaf. In tea, in awareness, in the vast space that had been here all along. How much of your anxiety comes from trying to know everything, from trying to have all the answers, to understand all the implications, to be prepared for every possibility? How much energy do you spend accumulating information, as if enough knowledge will finally make you safe, finally quiet the worried mind? Deng discovered what you can discover right now. Peace doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from recognizing the spacious awareness that exists whether you know or don't know, whether you understand or don't understand, whether you're right or wrong. Think about all the information you carry in your mind. Facts, memories, opinion, analyse, theories, beliefs, judgments. Some of it useful, some of it outdated, some of it contradictory. Your mind has become like Deng's warehouse, full of accumulated knowledge, and you've become the anxious warehouse keeper, constantly checking. Do I know enough? Have I forgotten something important? What if I'm wrong? What if there's crucial information I'm missing? But underneath all that accumulated knowledge, underneath all the worry about knowing or not knowing, there's awareness. Simple, direct, spacious awareness. It doesn't need to know tomorrow's problems to exist right now. It doesn't need to understand everything to be peaceful. It's already whole, already complete, already free. Whether your mind is full of knowledge or empty of knowledge, right now, you're aware. You don't need to think about being aware. You don't need to understand awareness. You just are aware. This awareness, this simple, immediate knowing that you exist, that experience is happening. This doesn't require any accumulated knowledge. A newborn baby has it. An elderly person with dementia has it. You have it right now, regardless of how much or how little you know. Feel your breath moving. You don't need to know how respiration works to breathe. Your body breathes. Your heart beats. Your cells regenerate. All of this happens in awareness, without requiring you to understand it, control it, or know everything about it. The worried mind wants to know, how will I handle tomorrow? What's the right decision? What if I make a mistake? What if I forget something important? But these are thoughts arising in awareness. The awareness itself doesn't worry. It simply holds everything worried thoughts and peaceful thoughts, knowing and not knowing, questions and answers with the same open spaciousness. You are not the warehouse full of knowledge. You are not the anxious keeper checking inventory. You are the space in which the warehouse exists. You are the awareness in which all knowledge and all ignorance arise and dissolve. Let your shoulders release now. Let your jaw soften. You don't need to know how tomorrow will unfold. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to have all the answers. The awareness that you are is already at peace, already whole, already free from the tyranny of needing to know. Thoughts will still arise, but I need to figure this out. But what if I don't understand? But what about all the things I don't know? Notice these thoughts. They're like ripples on water. They arise in the vast stillness of awareness. They don't disturb the essential nature of awareness any more than clouds disturb the sky. You can let the worried thoughts about not knowing enough just be there. They don't require your belief. They don't require your engagement. They can arise and dissolve in the spaciousness of awareness, like leaves falling into water, perfectly visible but not disturbing the fundamental clarity. Rest in that spaciousness now. Not the spaciousness you create by getting rid of thoughts. The spaciousness that's already here, that has always been here, that holds all your knowledge and all your ignorance with equal openness. Vast, clear, at peace. Feel yourself settling into that spaciousness, into the freedom of not needing to know everything, of simply resting as the awareness that holds all experience without being defined by any of it. Your breathing continues naturally. Your body rests deeply, and the worried thoughts about tomorrow dissolve like mist in morning sunlight. And as this spaciousness becomes more and more apparent, as the weight of needing to know finally lifts, we journey one last time tonight, to a quiet temple garden where an aging monk tended flowers and discovered that the peace he'd been seeking for 40 years had been present in every moment he'd stopped looking for it. In a small temple in the mountains north of Kyoto, in the spring of 1793, an old monk named Tesshu spent his days tending a garden. He was 72 years old and had been a monk for more than 50 years. In his youth, he had practiced intensely long hours of zazen, strict retreats, study of koans, the rigorous discipline of monastic life. He had served as the temple's cook, its treasurer, its head monk. He had taught students, led ceremonies, traveled to other temples to study with renowned masters. Now, in the final years of his life, his main duty was simple. He cared for the temple garden. It was not a grand garden, just a small courtyard between the meditation hall and the monks' quarters. A few carefully placed stones, a maple tree, some moss, a narrow stream that ran along one edge, fed by mountain springs. In spring, azaleas bloomed pink and white along the paths. Every morning, just after dawn meditation, Teshu would make his slow way to the garden. His knees were stiff now, his back bent from decades of sitting. He moved carefully, feeling each step, his hand sometimes resting on the wooden fence for balance. The garden knew the rhythm of the seasons better than any calendar. Today, in late April, the maple tree was showing its first tender leaves, that particular shade of spring green that seems to glow from within. The moss was thick and soft from the recent rains. Small purple wildflowers had appeared along the stream's edge, flowers whose name Teshu had never learned, but which returned faithfully every spring. He knelt slowly beside a patch of moss, feeling his knees complain, as they always did. The dampness from last night's rain had seeped into the earth. He could smell it, that rich smell of wet soil and growing things. Weeds had appeared. They always did. Teshu reached out and gently loosened the soil around a small, unwanted plant, working his fingers into the earth until he could ease it out, roots and all. He placed it aside. Another weed. Another. His movements were slow, methodical, without hurry. A younger monk, passing by on his way to the kitchen, paused and bowed. "Deshu-san, shall I help you? There are many weeds." Teshu looked up, smiled. "Thank you, but I have nowhere else to be." The young monk bowed again and continued on. Teshu returned to his work. There was something peaceful about it. The simple repetition, reaching, loosening, pulling, setting aside. The feel of cool earth under his fingers, the slight ache in his lower back, the morning sun warming the top of his head. He remembered, suddenly, a conversation from decades ago. He'd been a young monk then, perhaps 30 years old, consumed with questions about enlightenment. His teacher had been sweeping the courtyard, this very courtyard. In fact, though the stones had been arranged differently then. "Roshi," Teshu had asked, unable to contain his urgency. "When will I finally understand? When will I break through?" His teacher had continued sweeping. The sound of the broom against stone, leaves gathering into a small pile. "What are you trying to break through to?" the teacher had asked. "To awakening, to seeing my true nature, to freedom from this constant worry and confusion." "And where is this freedom you seek? In the future?" Yes, I suppose so. After I've practiced enough. After I've finally understood." The teacher had stopped sweeping, had looked at Teshu with kind eyes. The sound of this broom on stone, the smell of autumn leaves, the ache in my shoulders from yesterday's work, the blue of the sky right now, above these walls. This is it. This is what you're looking for. There is no other place to arrive at. Teshu had felt frustrated then, disappointed. That couldn't be the answer. It was too simple, too ordinary. Surely enlightenment was something more than just this. But now, half a century later, his fingers in the cool morning earth, pulling weeds from around moss that had been growing here longer than he'd been alive. Teshu understood. Or rather, he'd stopped needing to understand. Stopped waiting for something else. Stopped seeking some other moment than this one. A bird called from the maple tree. Teshu didn't know what kind of bird. The knowing or not knowing of its name didn't change the clarity of its song. 3 notes, repeated. Then silence. Then 3 notes again. He finished with the moss and stood slowly, feeling his knees object, feeling the small crack in his lower spine that had been there for 20 years. He walked, shuffled, really to the stream's edge where leaves had accumulated against the rocks, creating a small dam. He knelt again, this time on the smooth stone that bordered the stream. The water was clear and cold, running down from the mountain. He reached in, feeling the shock of cold against his warm hands, and began carefully removing the leaves, placing them on the bank to dry. The water, freed, ran more quickly. He could see small stones at the bottom, rounded by years of flowing water. A tiny fish, no longer than his thumb, darted between shadows. The sound of the water, the coolness against his hands, the dampness from the stone seeping through his robes at his knees, the ache in his back, the bird still calling from the maple tree, the smell of wet earth and new growth. This was what his teacher had meant. There was nowhere else to arrive at, nothing else to become. This moment, exactly as it was complete. The worried thoughts that used to fill his mind. Am I enlightened yet? Am I practicing correctly? What will happen when I die? Have I wasted my life? Those thoughts still arose sometimes. Just this morning, in fact, during Zazen, he'd noticed the familiar whisper of worry. You're running out of time. You're 72. So many years of practice, and what do you have to show for it? But now, with his hands in cold water, removing leaves from around rocks, the thought seemed almost funny. What did he have to show for it? This, right here. The perfect ordinariness of this moment. The stream running over stones. The moss growing green. The leaves budding on the maple tree. His breath moving in and out without any help from worried thinking. He remembered trying so hard in his younger years, trying to achieve something, become someone, reach some distant shore of complete understanding. The effort had been exhausting. The worry about whether he was succeeding had been constant. When had it changed? There hadn't been one dramatic moment. No thunderclap of sudden enlightenment. Just a gradual relaxing, a slow recognition that what he'd been seeking was present in the seeking itself. That peace wasn't somewhere else, waiting for him to finally arrive. It was here, in the simple act of being present with whatever was arising. A cloud moved across the sun. The garden dimmed slightly, then brightened again as the cloud passed. The temperature of the air shifted cool, then warm. All of it happening on its own, without any effort from him. Teshu finished clearing the stream and stood again. His robes were damp at the knees. He could feel the wetness, cool against his skin. Instead of worrying about it, or trying to change it, he simply felt it. Damp knees. So what? They would dry in the sun. He walked the narrow path between the moss and the stones, looking for anything that needed attention. Not searching for problems, not trying to make the garden perfect, just looking, being present with what was here. A spider had built a web between 2 small shrubs. The morning dew still clung to it, each drop catching the light. Teshu stopped to watch. The spider sat motionless at the web's center, waiting, patient. No hurry at all. How much of his life had he spent hurrying to the next thing, the next achievement, the next level of understanding? And what had all that hurrying gotten him? Just more hurrying, more worry about whether he was hurrying in the right direction. Now, watching the spider wait with infinite patience in its dew-covered web, Teshu felt no need to hurry anywhere. His body was here, in this garden. His mind was here, watching light catch on water drops. There was nothing else that needed to happen. The bell rang, distant, from inside the temple. Time for morning meal. Teshu turned slowly, taking one last look at the garden. The maple tree with its new leaves. The moss, darker green now, where he'd pulled the weeds. The stream running clear over stones. The spider in its web. All of it exactly as it should be. All of it changing moment by moment. Nothing permanent. Nothing to grasp. Nothing to become. Just this. Just the simple flow of one moment into the next. As he walked back toward the temple buildings, Teshu noticed his breath. In, out. In, out. The same breathing he'd been watching in Zazen for 50 years. Nothing special about it. Just air moving in and out of lungs. And yet somehow it was everything. This breath. This step. This feeling of his feet against the earth. Inside the temple, the younger monks were already gathering for the meal. Teshu took his place at the end of the line, the place reserved for the oldest monks who moved most slowly. He didn't mind being last. There was no hurry. The meal was simple. Rice, pickled vegetables, miso soup. Teshu ate slowly, tasting each bite. The slight sourness of the pickles, the warmth of the soup, the texture of rice between his teeth. Just eating. Nothing more needed. After the meal, there were chores. Teshu's task today was to fold the zazen cushions that had been washed and dried in yesterday's sun. He sat in the meditation hall, the empty hall quiet except for the sound of birds outside, and folded each cushion carefully. The fabric was soft from many washings. It smelled faintly of sun and fresh air. Fold. Smooth. Stack. Fold. Smooth. Stack. His hands knew what to do. No thinking required. Just the simple pleasure of completing a task that needed doing. By late afternoon, Teshu found himself back in the garden. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows. The air had cooled slightly. He sat on a stone bench near the maple tree and simply rested. His mind was quiet. Not empty thoughts still arose, drifted through, dissolved. But there was space around them. They didn't grab him the way they used to. They were just thoughts, passing through awareness like clouds passing through sky. The sound of water from the stream, the rustling of new leaves in a slight breeze, his breath, moving naturally, the hardness of stone beneath him, the coolness of air on his face. Somewhere in the temple, someone was chanting. He could hear the drone of it, rhythmic and steady. The same chants he'd chanted 10,000 times in his life. The words had stopped having individual meaning long ago. Now they were just sound. Just the human voice making patterns in air. A peaceful tiredness settled over him. His eyes grew heavy. That was okay. If he dozed here on this stone bench, that was fine. If he stayed awake, that was fine too. It didn't matter. Both were just this moment, unfolding as it would. The garden grew quieter as evening approached. The bird in the maple tree had stopped calling. The stream continued its endless flow. The spider remained in its web. Everything exactly as it was. Teshu's breath slowed. His eyes closed. The sound of water, the feel of stone, the coolness of evening air, all of it held gently in awareness, not needing to be anything other than what it was. Just this breath, just this moment, already complete, already whole, already home. Feel the simple fact of breathing. In, out. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to be different. This moment, exactly as it is enough. You've traveled through so many stories tonight, so many teachings, so many insights about worried minds and peaceful awareness. But here, now, at the end of all the stories, there's nothing more to understand, nothing more to achieve, nowhere else to arrive. Just this breath, moving in and out. Just this body, resting in darkness. Just this awareness, here now, needing nothing. Teshu spent 50 years seeking something beyond the ordinary moments of his life. Pulling weeds, washing cushions, breathing. And in the end, he discovered that those ordinary moments were what he'd been seeking all along. Not something hidden behind them. Not something waiting in the future after more practice. Just this. The simple flow of being alive, moment by moment. You don't need to wait for someday to be at peace. Someday, when the worried thoughts finally stop. Someday, when you finally understand everything. Someday, when you've solved all your problems. Peace is here. Now, in the simple fact of breathing, in the darkness holding you, in the soft weight of blankets, in the quiet of night, let your breathing be exactly as it is. Not trying to breathe more deeply or more slowly, just allowing breath to move naturally, as it's been doing since you were born, as it will continue doing without any help from worried thinking. Feel your body resting, the weight of your head on the pillow, the softness beneath you, the temperature of air against your face, all of it just as it is, perfect in its ordinariness. Thoughts may still drift through. That's fine. Let them drift like clouds, like leaves floating down a stream. You don't need to follow them. You don't need to push them away. Just let them be what they are, movements in awareness, arising and dissolving, leaving no trace. Tomorrow will take care of itself. The future exists only in thought. Right now, there is only this. This breath, this rest, this simple moment of being alive. And this moment is enough. You are enough. Nothing more is needed. Just this. Let your breathing carry you deeper now, into rest, into sleep, into the peace that has always been here beneath every worried thought. Your body knows how to rest. Your breath knows how to flow. And you, the awareness holding it all, have nowhere to go and nothing to become. Sleep when it comes. Rest in this moment until sleep arrives, and let all the teachings of tonight dissolve into the simple sweetness of letting go, of releasing everything, of finally resting in the peace that was never absent. only overlooked. Just this. Just rest. Just peace. Tonight, you've journeyed through 8 worlds, ancient monasteries and mountain hermitages, temple gardens and meditation halls, from Sri Lanka to Japan, from China to Korea, Tibet to Vietnam. 8 stories, 8 teachers, 8 different paths to the same truth. Peace has always been here, waiting beneath the worried mind. You heard Rahula discover that thoughts are not facts. Kensho learned that fighting patterns only strengthens them. Jiang realized he was the sky, not the clouds. Min find freedom in the present moment. Wulmyong understand that the worried mind was just weather passing through awareness. Pema recognized she didn't need to control her mind, only stop disturbing it. Dung let go of needing to know everything. And Tesu, in his final years, find peace in the simple ordinariness of pulling weeds and listening to water. Each story different, each path unique, but all pointing to the same discovery. You are not your worried thoughts. You are the vast, spacious awareness in which all thoughts arise and dissolve. And that awareness is already at peace, already whole, already free. The worried mind will return tomorrow. That's what worried minds do. But now you know something the worried mind doesn't know. It's just weather. Just clouds passing through sky. Just ripples on water that return naturally to stillness when you stop stirring them up. You don't need to fight your worried thoughts. You don't need to fix them or solve them or make them go away. You only need to remember what you truly are, not the thoughts, but the awareness. Not the clouds, but the sky. Not the ripples, but the clear water that holds them all. Let this wisdom sink in as you sleep tonight. Let it work beneath conscious thought. When you wake tomorrow, you may not remember all the stories, all the names, all the teachings. That's perfect. The wisdom doesn't need to be remembered. It just needs to be absorbed. The way soil absorbs rain, the way night absorbs light, the way sleep absorbs worry. Your body is resting. Your breath is flowing. And somewhere deep within, beneath all thought, you are already at peace. If you found rest here tonight, if these ancient teachings brought you comfort, consider subscribing to this channel so others who lie awake at 3 in the morning might find their way here too. Your subscription helps this wisdom reach more tired minds, more worried hearts, more people seeking peace. But even that can wait. Right now, there's only this: breathing in darkness, releasing into rest, dissolving into the peace that was never absent. You are the sky. You are the awareness. You are already home. Sleep well. Rest deeply. Good night.